Live from Studio A in PressCorps World Headquarters, this is Zero Dark PressCorps. It's a live, community-based call-in show, fielding your thoughts on and tales from the Foxhole War. So join the Discord right now through the link below, sign in through the call queue text channel, and hop in the voice lounge for a chance to share your story. Tonight's developer guest, level design director and writer, Matt. And now, your host, 13-time winner of the Geoffrey Jennings Award for Excellence in Journalism, Geoffrey Jennings.
Okay. Hey, look at that. Welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. Just as the man said, another exciting episode. I think we're finally getting back on this every 2 weeks train. We'll see where that goes. Before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you to all the members of the press corps. Thank you for listening, of course, as always, all of our audience and all those who want to interact. But really, thank you to all the members of the press corps who are putting in a lot of work in various different projects. I'm being very, very vague right now, but I just want to say thanks because they know what they're doing, and there's some things that are very exciting that we're going to be revealing hopefully in the next month. Some things we're working on now, some things that are in motion right now, so it's very, very, very exciting. But you know what? What's really exciting now is that we have on not their debut appearance on the show, but I believe this is their first solo appearance, which is Matt, aka NorthernPixels, from the Clapfoot / Foxhole developer team. Matt, thank you.
Hello. Hi, excited to be here. By myself. I have no leash this time. I'm just kidding. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing fantastic. The microphone profile there you see is just a bot for technical purposes, but I think everyone is pretty excited just because I've been seeing some talk. And that people are excited just to hear you and see what you have to say. And you know what? A lot of questions that are being prepared and directed for you. Just a. Hold on.
I'm not lying.
There we go. Did I fix it?
Yes.
Hold on. I had Commander Rod's radio drama playing over all of that until just now. So thank you to all 10 of you that pinged me. I'm not joking. Actually, thank you for all doing that. Thank you for all paying attention and trying to help me. So again, part of the setup. So it's all good.
It was funny because they're like, your mic is picking something up. I'm like, no, it's not.
Right,
your mic
it's all
sounds
through
clear
the OBS. But in any case, let's get right into it because we got a lot of callers tonight, which is fantastic. A lot of questions. So, Matt, let's lay it on there. What's your position in Clapfoot, and what are your primary responsibilities?
I kind of like to say that I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I kind of do all the stuff that no one else wanted to do, aside from maybe level design. But I'm the level design director, and I also do pretty much, I think aside from some tooltips, I pretty much write everything in the game. And those are kind of the two big things. But I also do all the sound effects, all the visual effects, and I host the streams and stuff like that. So I kind of do. A lot of my jobs came from we need somebody to do this, and I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And that was years and years ago now, but yeah, so that's what I do.
Actually, that reminds me of some job advice I used to hear way back when, which is that when it comes to responsibilities, when people ask, don't say no. And then eventually you'll just embed yourself enough that no one else will know how to do, and then you're irreplaceable. You can't get fired. So
that's I'm not afraid to dive into the deep end and look stupid. I think that's a really important thing. I think it's really important not to just because you don't know how to do something, you trying to figure it out. You can learn something that you really, really like or really, really hate. I've had to do everything from production development and scheduling things and data data input and everything, and you learn really quickly what you don't. I've also done a whole bunch of other jobs in my life, and you learn really quickly what you hate and what you like. So
Hmm.
by doing that.
Gotcha. So, if you hear it in the game of Foxhole, if you read it in the game of Foxhole, and if you, I guess you traverse it in terms of the map, that's probably your area of expertise. That's
I've,
your
I've
fault.
I've at least had my hands in it. Yeah. In
Okay.
terms of maps, a lot of people are like, "You're the one who makes all the maps." It's like, have you seen how many maps? Like, there's no way I could have done that all myself. And there's many people work on maps. One of the main people who's also very responsible is Max, and Leon, and even HB's had his hands in it. We've had a lot of people work on maps. So, but I kind of just
Mhm.
I wrangle it all together. So I've probably had my hands in it, but I want to make that really clear because I see that a lot where everybody's like, "You're the one guy who does all this stuff," and that might have been true like at the beginning of the project, but not anymore. So,
Gotcha. It's kind of diffused a little bit.
yeah, and it has to be. It's just too much work. It's impossible.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but you are one of the point men when it comes to Foxhole's non-player lore and the many concerted design decisions that go into building that up. You and Mark, but actually, is it 50-50 you and Mark, or how's that
Um,
pan out?
Mark and I, at the beginning of the project, like, Mark's the director of the game, so like ultimately, like everything goes through him.
Right.
So that's important to like realize. At the beginning of the project, we had a whole. We talked about this a little bit on the anniversary stream.
Hmm.
The 100 stream, but we had this whole other thing developed, and we didn't like it, so we threw it out and we started over. And once we developed a rule set, basically, it's like a rule set or a vision. I know that word is a little tainted, but we developed a vision for what we wanted to do, and we have a set of rules that we have to follow. And then once those rules are established, then it's my job to sort of be the arbiter of those rules, making sure all that stuff stays in play and we don't veer too far away. So like if not that this happens frequently, but if like concept art comes in and there's like something like really like high technology or something, I got to be the one to say like, well, that doesn't really fit. So that's kind of where we're at. But obviously, all of the rule sets were developed by Mark and myself, and now I'm the one who sort of like keeps all that stuff in line, or continues to develop it in terms of the lore,
Gotcha. So you're kind
as
of like
well
the
as Julian.
archivist.
Julian's also really involved in this as well as the kind of the concept artist at the company. So it's it's sort of like the three of us kind of maintain it, so that it stays very very consistent. And consistency is key because it's really easy. Like there's so many crazy good ideas and interesting ideas, but sometimes we have to throw stuff out because it's like it doesn't fit within that rule set, and that's one of those
Mhm.
things. Even when it comes to like making mechs and stuff in our fantasy events, like we still stick to our rule sets. We just like change. We just move the pivot so that we can allow for some more stuff because it's like a special event or something.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's kind of how that works. I don't know if that helped or hindered your understanding,
No,
but
no, it's just not. It's not just you. Where it's like if you're
yeah.
out sick, it's not like everyone else on the team is like, oh no, we forgot. Like we literally no one else knows the history of the colonial republic. Like it's kind of diffused a bit. So, but regardless, so then going into some of the opening questions here, how does work on the official lore of Foxhole's world progress alongside the player culture that develops in the game, the stuff that you don't have control over? How do you design around that?
I ignore it entirely.
Okay.
Um, like I see it, but I ignore it. It is like
Hmm.
irrelevant to what I'm doing because my job is not to um know that. My job is to uh kind of lay down a canvas that's interesting to explore. At least that's the way I
Hmm.
look at it. And as
Yeah.
long as people, in my opinion, as long as people are inspired and they want to interface with it, I think then I'm happy.
Yeah. Because
Um,
there's all sorts of idiosyncrasies. I mean, I really appreciate people who try to, work within the lore and they try to transfer that in game. For instance, I will always, just as one-off example, I'll always appreciate the Swords of Morrow for naming their regiment the Swords of Morrow as
mhm.
opposed to like the 101st Airborne U.S. Army division. It's like, okay, so you said U.S. Army, whatever. That's no one's really problem, and that's cool and all. But just that you take that extra step, which is cool, and certainly like someone starts drawing, which I appreciate, but someone starts drawing like, here's an anime version of Callahan in like space combat armor, which is cool.
Yeah.
But that stuff we can kind of ignore. But if, for instance,
Well,
in terms of,
I'll
go ahead.
actually stop you for a second, because like the thing is that like Callahan as a figure still comes from that, and they're still inspired in some way by it. So
Huh.
I tell people, a lot of people will come to me and they'll say like, I need to know if this fits within the lore, this fan thing that I'm doing that's really cool and I'm excited
I
about.
have done that personally many times.
And usually what I tell people is like, I don't even worry about it. Like you like use your headcanon and have fun with it, get creative, because it's like I don't really want to stop. I'm hoping that like it provides more of like a spark of inspiration for you to do something cool. I'd love for people to like one day they create this whole. I've seen lots of stuff where they have these all like these headcanon stories that they create, or characters that they've created in like fan art and stuff, and then like it kind of becomes its own thing. And I'd almost like my dream thing is like if they take it one step further and literally turn it into its own thing, and then they have something that they've made that's unique and cool, because like that's really valuable, and that's like the coolest thing to me. But if you do something that's like completely sticks within the lore and it's like really rigid and stuff, that's cool too. But I also think that like you probably are more creative when you feel like you have some ownership over it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So that's my kind of stance on it.
I can attest to that. And again, many DMs I've begged you, and through the lore channel I've begged you, like, just give me the name of this so I can I can make things. I can write this little details. But I think we've come to this kind of tacit agreement, which you just played out there. Which is,
Mhm.
I guess it's easy to clear to say now, which is that, hey, do whatever, right? You're telling us do whatever, but don't expect you to like confirm anything.
No, and I won't, because
Yeah.
it's not like it's not as interesting to me, and it won't be as interesting to you. And I think that's key. Is like if you want to make cool stuff, I really want you to make cool stuff. And if what we did inspires you in any way, that's great.
So what if you're doing fan art stuff or fan writing or anything fan, just do it for yourself, which is the conclusion I've come to for a while now.
And I'll look at it and I'll think it's cool. And I know Julian is the same, and all the people on the team are the same. Like we have our own our own studio Discord, and we'll share this stuff all the time, and we'll always be like, oh, this is really cool. And that's why we have
Mhm.
community highlights and stuff, so that we can like appreciate
Hey,
all
about
the
that,
stuff that you do.
has there been any thought about turning community highlights into its own separate stream?
A lot of stuff has come around. We're kind of, as you guys probably can imagine, we're kind of like reevaluating what that's going to be, what the whole
Okay.
stream thing is going to be, a little bit. So, it, yeah, I think it's exciting times because, you know, f- we don't just want to do a stream to do a stream. So I think there's definitely stuff that we can do, and I think HB it would probably be really into that as well. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't think it's anything officially that we've talked about, but I'll bring it up with HB. I'm sure he'd have fun with that.
Just a thought from me. I don't know if people like that or not, but just having its own thing might cater more to people who are into that, and then you'll feel less hurried trying to get to the developer stuff. So half the stream saying just move on already, when it's like just wait. I don't know. You know what? You'll get a lot of questions, so I think I'll do one more question. What is the future, as since you're a level designer? What is the future of urban combat in Foxhole? Is it going to be more of the same? Could we see more vertical expansion, which is taller buildings with more floors, or maybe horizontal expansion, which is larger cities with more building sprawl? What's the future there?
It's probably not going to change too much.
Okay.
We're pretty happy with it the way it is right now. And I think like Sulper Channel is probably as big as it's going to get in terms of size.
Hmm.
It's pretty large, and it kind of stretches the bounds of what we really wanted to do in the first place. It's a little bigger than probably should be, which is on me because I wanted to make a really big space. But yeah, I see this all the time where it's like make a map that's like a whole city. And my answer to this is pretty consistent. I don't think you want that. I think you want that. And
The
the reality
infamous
of it,
what's that infamous Blizzard line that gets memed to hell? It's like you think you want that, but you don't. But also, actually,
yeah. I mean, I think that would have to be a game in itself. Because I think it's like Foxhole is not about micro detail in terms of like what you're doing. It's sort of about like it's not even about macro. It's sort of like a blend between the two, which is kind of strange. It's a bit like it's not quite an
Mhm.
RTS, but it's also not like a shooter. So I think I think we're trying to hit like a middle ground, and so we don't want to go too deep into that. I think I think I'm pretty happy with it. I think there's like a couple more mechanics I would really like to see, like just spitballing. I'm not saying I'm not confirming any of this, but something I
Mhm.
would really like to see is like doors and like breaching and stuff like that.
Huh.
Because we don't really have that. Um, so one of the things about urban combat is you can't make it feel like you can like hole up in a space. Really, you can garrison, but it'd be kind of cool if there was like another stage to that, in my opinion. But in terms of yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be more cities in the game, but I don't think they're going to get much bigger than Saltburn Channel. If I'm being honest, I think that's probably the limits of our what of our design for urban areas. Because we
Mm.
want to have one of the things that is sort of hard to grasp is that the distances in Foxhole are sort of abstracted. So if you have if you were to suddenly have an urban sprawl that was like a full map size, that would be bigger than any city in real life, probably. Like in terms of like comparatively to like what we're trying to accomplish. So the distances between locations and how far it takes to traverse is sort of really carefully calculated. And I don't know that that always comes across, but that's like we really like iterated on that a lot. That's something that's been very carefully crafted. So to change that, I think would be just like fundamentally changing something that we don't want to change.
Yeah, it's kind of a baseline, and then it would just throw everything off. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. I still because there's that one suggestion like 2 or 3 years ago where it's like here's a capital region where literally the whole region is a city, and I'm like, damn, I want that so bad, but it's
Yeah,
probably too much. And also, like, part of the problem is that the isometric, the how combat is, although in my opinion, corner aiming is still kind of messed up. But Steve, even if you know change that, it would still be weird having anything more than 2 floors. Um, with the isometric camera.
oh yeah, you did mention verticality. So verticality is something we tried, and we did show some of that in the 100 stream.
Mhm,
I think we do have more of that footage kicking around, but we had I think Anthony and I tried 4 floors in a building, and we actually knocked it down to 3 after one test. And what we found after we did lots and lots of tests with kind of a closed group of veteran players when we originally did the town redamps.
mhm,
And one of the things we did after many tests with multiple floors, we just found like you know in these like operations that we were running, and we were kind of just letting players do it like create sort of mock operations, right? They just weren't used, and it was a lot of technical work to get it working if we were gonna go down that path. And
mhm,
they worked fine for the test. Like we did a sort of an amalgamation to make it work like well enough for the purposes, and it just didn't seem to be like a strategic consideration because like I said, it's not micro, it's not like little detail, it's not like you're playing Rainbow Six Siege where like height is like that kind of height is really going to make a huge difference in your operation. Like if someone is going to take out that structure, they're going to take out that structure. It's just kind of irrelevant. So it just ended up being kind of more of a liability because you put a target on your back when you're in that position, so people stopped using them. So it was just kind of an interesting choice of like, do we go down this long path of really making this like technically feasible? Are people going to use it? And the consensus was kind of like, maybe we can just use height a little bit more strategically rather than being like these multi-floor stacked buildings, and we can keep the this sort of pseudo RTS feeling that we have. Because as soon as buildings start to go off camera in height, you start to lose this like feeling of like you're playing sort of a one man in an RTS.
mm.
So yeah, there's a lot of considerations there. It's something that Anthony and I were really passionate about trying. We even did things where we had like walkways between buildings where we're making like kind of slums
Ooh.
and stuff like that. And yeah, no, it just none of it really worked the way we thought it would, and the game felt better without it. So that's really it wasn't that we just like didn't try it. I think that's really important to like, and it isn't that we didn't try it multiple times. We actually did try it. It just it's one of those things where you have to always keep the goals of the game in mind,
Mhm.
100%, and that's a really tough. when you're on the outside looking in, it can be really tough to understand why decisions like that are made. But sometimes
You tried it.
Yeah, we tried. We always try stuff like that, and it's always like, did it fit with in reality with the game? And no is kind of the answer. And it's like it's game development is tough that way because we thought for sure that was what we were going to do. In fact, that was like in the initial notes of like of when we were doing the town revamps and stuff was we want to have multi-story buildings. And
technically you do with you can like occupy the windows like you do a foxhole and you just kind of teleport up, which is weird, and it can be kind of gamed in a way. Is that like a stopgap measure? Are you planning on keeping that?
I can't remember why that happened. That would probably be a question for someone else. I can't remember why. I don't think originally we were even going to allow people to occupy windows. So I think I think that came about after like a lot of conversations, though. I honestly I can't remember exactly the reason. Mark would probably have a better answer for you for that one.
Okay.
But
for now, our dreams of grappling from the roof and flipping upside down like in Vegas, Rainbow Six Vegas, dashed in Foxhole.
Yeah, also Rainbow Six Siege is like one of my favorite games ever, so I'm always trying to put stuff in there that's like siege related. But yeah.
Can we throw cameras? And like what's her name? Valkyrie, I think.
Yeah, just remote cameras in Foxhole.
Except they're like 1940s cameras, so like the big like film cameras. Okay.
Yeah, but that's why I think like breaching doors would be cool. Like I think that's also something that I think shotguns could be really useful for, is like breach and clear sort of maneuvers. But we don't even have that concept in the game, and I think that might come down to that like micro element.
I think safe houses need to be looked at because they've just always been. We're used to long-time players are used to safe houses now, but they've always been confusing. And like honestly, personally, it's to the point where it's like, can we just go around this thing and cut it off, as opposed to like trying to take it on? Because it's like, well, the windows automatically shoot, right? The AI shoots, but then like, how do you destroy it? Well, you just kind of have to rush it, go into the inside, bayonet everyone, and then just throw close quarters each. It's weird. So yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to never get looked at. I think it's. I think as we continue to iterate on the game and even past 1.0, I think you'll see us kind of look at things and be like, does this feel kind of out of date? And we'll look at it and make a call on it either way. But I don't think there's any plans for that right now. But.
There's a lot of idiosyncrasies that will just, when the big wave of people comes in, we'll just be like, yeah, this is weird, but hey, just stick around. It's going to be cool. All right, let's get to our callers, our dedicated callers. In fact, we're going to start off with one of our regulars here is actually hold on just a bit. Before we go in, just want to explain that we do have a no drama rule. This is all in the top of the call queue channel posted there in Discord. We do not talk about any bannings or dumb clan drama or anything like that, regiment drama, as well as if you are in a regiment and there are two of you in a row in the call queue, we will insert somebody in between just so that a single regiment doesn't take over the whole night. And all the rules are posted in the Discord channel there, just like it always is. So, as I was saying, Lek, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. Lek, how are you?
I'm all right.
Fantastic. What did you have for us?
Well, I know in the announcement you specified that we should probably tailor our questions based on the dev that we have today. Howdy, Matt. So you are involved in general art direction, maps, lore. Is that it, or is there anything more?
Well, for one, I did also cover this at the beginning of the show. But two, I do sound effects and VFX as well as I write and do map direction. I'm involved in the art pipeline, but I'm not like art director per se. I'd probably put that on Julian. But yeah,
like as far as like theming, right?
Yeah, if it's like out of theme, I'll bring it up. And
now he's the guy who looks over the artist's shoulder and is like, no, look more like this. No, can you make it more like?
It's too green, like maybe I don't know.
It's too angular,
not colonial
rounded. Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about the direction of the game's themes with regards to gameplay. Like, currently, we see the impact of, art in faction-specific vehicles, weapons, all that stuff in the world, as well as, like, the game world itself, right? And the lore and all that jazz. And I think this really helps with the immersion, right? Of just being, because, like, of the more serious elements, whereas the community brings the more wacky elements of Foxhole. Now, I wanted to think about the future here. Like, what art-wise, theming-wise, etc. Like, do you of like the current styles of Colonial and Warden? What do you see being taken to other areas such as um, bunkers or logistics? Like, all of the logistics and bunker buildings are exactly the same. All the structures are the same. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like make them different in function, but do you see there being any changes to the aesthetic of any of those like things, any of those areas that don't currently have like their own theming, where it feels very samey depending on no matter which side is attacking, like what the bunker is, right?
Um, without getting too into specifics, I can say that like there's going to be some stuff, but I can't really talk directly about it. So I'll have to talk around it. In terms of structures like foxholes and stuff, I'm not privy to any plans if there are any. So I can tell you, I know that there's, some plans to look at how building is done, but I don't know too much beyond that before 1.0. So probably not the right person to ask about this one. In terms of like bunkers, I think I would really like to see some stuff in the infrastructure so that like if you went into like a warden bunker base, it looks like a warden bunker base as opposed to just kind of being generic. I do think that's something that we should look at, and I think that furthermore, I think that there are some structures that should be themed a little bit more appropriately, because like now when you see different vehicles and everything, it feels like you're two opposing forces. And I think that has a really powerful effect, like you were talking about. Whereas like two foxholes, they could have been built by the same person. Like you don't need, like, who knows? It's just a piece of tarp like over a hole. Like I think I think that could be really interesting. Now, should it go like fully asymmetrical? I don't know. I think that'd be cool too, but I'm really not involved in any of that. So, yeah.
And
Hard question to
what
answer, but
one other thing, like regarding like the future in terms of like design and whatnot, like because we all know that like colonials are more angular in design and wardens are more rounded in terms of like vehicles specifically. What aspects of the design do most people would you say most people miss, and what aspects would you say of like the general theming of both sides are you taking for when you add trains?
um, I don't know what a train is. Uh,
Are you a heretic? Is that what I'm hearing?
um, I feel like, is that like an old car? I don't know. Anyway, uh, yeah, I think like one thing that I don't hear a lot of chatter about is the wardens are a little bit more like decorative, and the colonials have a little bit more of like a Spartan sense of uh, style. It's more practical, and so when it comes to like uh, their designs, there is a little bit more sort of quote unquote craftsmanship in the warden stuff, and that's Julian does a really good job of like putting that in there, especially given some of the theming around Foxhole. It can be a little hard to spot, but like there's not necessarily practical decisions on some of the warden vehicles where there is a little bit more on the colonial stuff. I think that's really cool. I think he does a great job with that stuff.
So how do you see all of that like affecting trains? Like I said,
What
You
do you
keep saying that
think?
word, and I don't really know
I
what that
need an
is.
answer.
It'll probably be a bullet train looking thing, and then for the wardens, and then the colonial one will just be ramshack. Actually, I do think it's kind of like I'm surprised no one else has played into this meme really. I think a couple people have, where it's like for colonial vehicles, it's just like hammer and nails onto like the bare minimum. It's kind of like the
Bang,
orcs
bang,
from
bang, bang.
Warhammer,
Yeah.
right?
Um, yeah, if that's what a train is, then sure.
Like
Saucy boy.
I think we're at time, but you want to close out with anything?
That's about. That's
So
about.
disappointed.
What? Hey, look, I can't have a banger question every day that lasts like 14 minutes. Plus, don't you want us to only last 7 minutes? Don't put this on me.
It's up to you. Okay.
Fucking being
Hey,
gaslit by the host out here.
If you didn't ask me about trains, I would have been disappointed.
Biased
so.
press. I told you this 2 years ago when you were fucking like, ugh. I don't like this biased media nonsense. You will spend the
wait,
truth.
real quick. I'm trying to keep tally. But who am I biased against? Colonials or Wardens?
You're biased against Lek.
Oh, okay. I mean,
I feel like that's fair.
Fuck
Yeah.
you.
Farewell.
Right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Nick.
You too. Yeah. Actually, no joke. I actually do think it's like the Wardens people really. I mean, actually, the 82 Dread Corps. They're literally based off a Warhammer 40k regiment. So
yeah.
they have like the most ornate things, whereas Colonials are more like the orcs, where it's like just slap metal on there and just it runs fine. It'll die, whatever. Coming up next, we have Overshock. I think this is their first time on the show, so welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps, Overshock. What did you have for us?
Okay. At first, I'd like to apologize for the prepubescent voice. Matt,
That's okay.
it is an honor to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Don't worry about it.
Hey, real quick. I'm using a voice filter. This has kind of been like an open secret. I'm pitching my voice down. And I did that because I found out that it was like, if I pitched my voice down, it was like a buff so that people in PlanetSide 2 would just listen to me more. So it's okay. It's fine.
Strategy. All right. So let's get on to the questions. I have quite a bit, so I hope you have some time. Question 1. Will we see a new Chronicle of Ashes soon, or close after the release of Foxhole 1.0?
There should be one. So originally, it was supposed to come out in December. But I just full transparency. I chose to focus on some more personal stuff instead, because I pretty much write the Chronicles of Ashes stuff completely separately from anything I do on the project. So it's not like I don't do that like during the day. It's kind of like a side project that I took on that I really wanted to do. So I just delayed it. I said I'll do it next year. It should be out before the summer. That's my plan. Summer being kind of nebulous, but I want it out before 1.0.
Quick question, real quick.
It's a bit of a longer one though. So
I mean, that's awesome. But does anyone else look at it before you publish it? Like, does Mark look at it, Julian, or anyone?
I mean, they look at it, but they probably don't have time to read all that stuff. Like, it's a little different, and that's a little bit more in my hands. And part of it is to develop. I have just kind of secretly, I do have beta readers, but so people do look at it. It's not just doesn't go out there blind. The first one though, nobody did, and I paid for it because I pretty much had to rewrite it. But anyway, this is what happens when you write. You need people to look at things. It's the purpose of Chronicle of Ashes is to develop the extended universe beyond what we see in game. That's the whole thing that I wanted to do. I wanted a sort of an outlet, because it's really not easy to do in game, and it's actually been extremely valuable because it allows us to sort of look at things a little bit more broadly with a little bit more of a wider viewpoint when we're making like more lore decisions and stuff. There's more of like a pantheon to kind of look at. It's kind of like the more we put out there, the more options we have, and the more we can expand it even further. So I feel like it's really valuable. Now in terms of this next one, it's probably, I really want it to be out before the summer. That's kind of my hope. I haven't had all the time in the world to write it though. So
with the current problem.
Yeah. But yeah, as soon as I sit down, I won't stop until I'm done. So, it'll get done. And like, as soon as I set a firm date, it'll be done by that date because I don't miss them. So, that's that. I would like to do 2 this year. I'd like to pretty much do 2 every year if I can, or more. But it just depends on how much time I want to put into it versus, because like I am like if anybody doesn't know this, I am a writer, so there's other stuff I have other goals in terms of my writing career that I'm trying to do in my spare time as well. So it's kind of like I have to balance my time because I can't always focus on everything because I still work, a Foxhole 9 to 5 during the week or whatever, right? So I have to kind of figure out what that balance is, and so it's tricky, but that's the fun part, I think. So
You are definitely a good writer, and I see that the character design you took in college did pay off. Next question. When can we expect to see a Foxhole world map completed? I'm not sure if this is ever going to occur. Or also known as, will my efforts of making a 20,000 by 10,000 pixel canvas Foxhole world map be in vain?
I mean, I'd love to see it. The world is a really big place. And
Yeah,
if you look at, I consider Foxhole to be like fantasy in a lot of ways, even though it's not like supernatural. I consider it to be fantasy. And if you look at a lot of like fantasy worlds, they're like one continent or like two continents often. And that's because it's really hard. It's very hard to do like world building as foresight is something. If a writer is doing that, they're either lying to you or they're crazy. And so I think it's just over time we will continue to expand. Even now, like a lot of the stuff that's mentioned in things like Chronicle of Ashes and things like the lore, they're not on any maps that we've seen. So we've already got lots of like points of reference. So,
so
I would love to
plans for this.
I would love to, but currently there's no plans to kind of go outside the area that's in the game in terms of like in the game. In terms of expanded stuff, I mean, maybe. I'm never going to say never because I've already expanded stuff before. So
we currently do not have an official world map. I mean, obviously, like the in-game, all the regions, but like we don't have an official zoomed-out map. There was that one where it looks like it was like written in old times or whatever, but I think that is now like way out of whack.
I would call that out of date. I think I drew that in 2017, so I think it's
right.
And the game has kind of been ever evolving since then. It's going to cool down towards 1.0, so it might be a better time to kind of revamp it. I just hate doing stuff and then redoing it like that. So, so I would say the current map in game, with a couple of exceptions, is probably the most accurate.
So I don't mean like deployable map, like the zoomed out.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have any plans for that?
I would love to, is what I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Whether or not it gets done, it's all a matter. When we get closer to 1.0, as we get down to like the last little bit, as part of some marketing, that would be pretty cool to do, and I'd love to get that done. But we'll see.
All right. Understandable. Okay, next question. I have 3 more. Geoffrey, do we have time for that?
Keep going, yeah. Got about 90 seconds, but if they're good, keep going.
Can we expect a Whedon's row map someday?
Something you can actually fight in and like play.
Yes. Like we know that Whedon's row is some sort of capital territory. I'm kind of the one who made that Reddit post of capital territories, but whatever.
Nice.
Oh, cool. Yeah, those.
I'm sorry to disappoint you horribly.
Yeah. Will we see a Whedon's row map someday?
I'm not gonna say never because there's stuff in the game now that I never thought we'd see, but I kind of want to leave it out of the game. And I know that's like a disappointing answer, but I kind of want to leave it as sort of like it's like in Star Wars. You hear about like the Death Star, and then you see the Death Star, and then once you actually kind of like know how it works, it's kind of like,
it's all the magic's ruined.
It's kind of the magic's ruined, and I kind of like.
Oh no! When you see the Death Star and like you're in it, I was like, that's pretty cool.
When you see it, but then it gets blown up by like one little missile in like a tube, so it's kind of like, well, that was kind of lame. I don't know.
Politically, in the lore, in the lore, it would be kind of weird too, because if, well, that just goes into the whole question of how the hell in the lore do you connect all of these weird-looking wars together? Yeah, it's like if the Colonials captured the Warden capital or vice versa, it's like, well, how the hell do you have another war like right after that? I don't know.
I'm not gonna say never. I'm gonna say never say never, but as of right now, I like it being more of a backdrop than an actual like battlefield.
I see. So
That
we're
would be
going to
my
stay to the 23 regions that we have so far for the
Foreseeable
foreseeable
future. Yeah.
Yeah.
There will definitely be more maps in the future.
Okay.
But whether we'll go to some of the places that are like Whedon's Row is kind of a place that is sort of deemed to be like legendary at the moment, and like it's one of those things where like I'm
It's like
kind
a
of like it that way.
holy terra of Siva.
Kinda, yeah. I like in terms of the way it's perceived. So I like it that way right now.
I see where you're coming from, and in fact, Overshock, that kind of goes into your other question because you wrote a lot of them down. Appreciate it about like showing, like actually officially showing Silas or Teamaro or Callahan. Kind of going into your next question.
Yeah. So these two bonuses, I saw that some people were very far behind in the queue with very interesting questions. So I reached out to them and asked them if they wanted their question asked. So that's what I did.
Go for it. We'll close with this one.
This one or these two?
Oh well, so Matt, may someday we get a portrait of the Maros, and with Callahan. Actually, is there an official portrait of Callahan? Well, I guess there's a statue, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's speculated, but
there will be more information about those characters in the future.
Okay,
that's what
there
I'll
we go.
say.
We'll leave it there.
I can't really talk more than that, unfortunately.
So I can't ask one more question. I'm heading off. That's
One more because actually I really like it.
All right. Who are the Wardens, and are there any still relevant native Sievish clans?
The second part of the question is like too deep, so I'm not going to go there, kind of per my rules. And you know, the Wardens are very proud people, and try not to dig myself a hole here.
Okay,
the Wardens are the Wardens are Siva is a country that is you know, built on an enormous amount of wealth, and that is something that they really will not let go easily, whether or not it matters anymore. And that's what I will say about the Wardens.
So are the Wardens the military force? Oh wait, no, you already said that. That's all you're gonna say. Sorry. I was gonna say, are the Wardens?
I would love to go into this, but it kind of I don't want to break my own rule where I don't really like answer these questions.
Right, we'll end it there. Hey, Overshock, that was a good call. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
All right, coming up next is the big boss himself, BigBossTeef. BigBossTeef, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. What did you have for us here?
I have a long question and a series of short questions. The long question I've been trying to ask Mark, but I just had been having bad luck because of work in the previous stream schedules.
Yeah, go for it.
Me and a group of other people drafted up a letter and then personally sent it in to Mark and then a moderator, hoping at least someone would read it in the development team. Do you know what I'm talking about? And if you do, have you read the letter?
I'm definitely not the person for this one. Unfortunately, no. I'm not privy.
It's on the topic of community toxicity. If you want, I can send you a copy of the letter, and then you can just discuss that amongst yourselves privately or something.
I think it's probably cool that that Mark has it, and you know, he's what the only thing I'll say is, you know, these guys are not just sitting around like, you know, laughing at this stuff. They take it very seriously, and so I'm sure if you sent it to them, then they've taken it very seriously. But it's a very tough topic to talk about.
I don't think we can discuss it here, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's why I'm being vague as possible. I just wanted to know if they read it or not. That's all I really want to know.
I would say if you sent it to him, he's probably read it.
Okay, all right. I'll take that at least for an answer. All right, now for actual fun questions. Can you bring back the Volta?
You know, it's probably my favorite weapon in the game. I've famously, that when the original version came out, I'm the one who balanced that, and I made it way too strong. But it was fun, and I really like that weapon. So it's also probably one of the most like lore steeped weapons. So I'm kind of attached to it. But I would love for it to come back. I don't know if it's going to, but
because the Colonials don't have a bolt action weapon, which is why I bring it up.
Yeah, but I would say like more weapons will come. So it's possibly, could be on the table.
Okay. Have you decided to what you want to do with the uniforms yet?
There's been a lot of talk, but unfortunately, that's not something I can go into.
So full disclosure, the press corps has access to a special journalist uniform that we were given, I think, a year ago or somewhere abouts there. And as much as we relish it and are appreciative of it, we really just want to see everyone else get their day in the sun. Uniforms are really cool. Really cool, man.
Yeah, I think like it's just not something we want to be like purely cosmetic. And I think like
would it be tied to rank and level or whatever you come up with?
I highly doubt it.
Doubt it. Okay.
Potentially, like that could be an option, but typically like we want it to be more like function over, or like form over. Sorry, function over form, not form over function. And like I think the press uniform is a really good example because there is actually a purpose to it, even though it is kind of like it is a very unique thing. We want to do cool stuff like that you can't see anywhere else, and so I think, yeah, that's pretty much what I can say.
Let me keep poking the holes here. Would would we? So it's not tied to rank. Interesting, because people have been asking for officer uniforms or something to denote a higher rank. Is that in the realm of something that might be planned? Yes, no.
I think that could be cool. I think it might, like, I don't know, detail wise, I don't know how it would work, but I think it could be cool. Probably would be more tied to something like the regiment system or something rather than
okay, I'm very much into that.
The reason that I say that is because, like, in some cases, like, we don't just want, hours played to be the indicator. It should be kind of like player driven as well. I think it's really complicated, and this is why I don't make these decisions, because it's too complicated for me.
There has been there have been like some back and forth discussion in the community where it's like, well, it would be kind of weird to see like 5 generals like running around, right, in general uniforms or whatever, or just like colonel uniform or something like that, and like only one private among them, and it's like, that's kind of weird.
Like what I wanted to know is if it was ever going to be tied to gameplay, because I talked to Max about this back in the day and referenced tribes on how light, medium, and heavy served actual gameplay purposes, and they looked cosmetically different even when you select these subset classes within the heavy, light, or medium armor.
Yeah, Tribes is one of my favorite series, so I totally know what you're talking about. And yeah, I think it's more like here's just an example off the cuff. Like I'm not saying this is confirmed because I wouldn't even know if it was. But like, we have weather now, so something to help mitigate weather would be something that would be really logical. Like you'd obviously have that
with gameplay implications. Like it would actually reduce,
rather than just being like, I'm in a ghillie suit. Like it doesn't, that stuff's cool, but in Foxhole we really want you to feel like you're part of like an army. You're a cog in a wheel. You're not a superhero, special man. Like so, like it's the idea of them being skins is probably never going to be on the table. I think they'll always have to have some implication, and there will always be a drawback or something. It'll never be like we don't just want people like running around all in strange uniforms just because it doesn't really fit the idea that you are like part of an army. Though I think that some games have done a really, really good job with this as well. I think Battlefield 1 is like excellent in terms of the way that they put that stuff together. But even then, I think it goes a little too far into like uniqueness, where sometimes you can't just like glance at someone and be like, oh, they're in this army. So I think like that's something we're really careful about. If you are a warden, we want you to know that this person is a warden, and so that's a really tricky. I don't envy Julian and Mark for having to come up with these things. I'm just the person who will say like that's not warden enough. So
Last line of defense, not warden enough is Matt. Okay, sorry, but Teef, why don't you close out here with the question?
The summer update. You guys are going to touch building on it, right?
I believe that's the plan.
All right.
I don't know what that entails, but I do believe that we've talked about that many times in this and stuff. Anyway.
Okay, and then I have a question regarding to your Sketchfab. How exactly does the Sketchfab work? Exactly.
In what regard?
A lot of the stuff on there, there's just not a lot of stuff on it. To be honest, like not a lot of the Warden weapons, Colonial weapons, vehicles, and stuff. And I've been told that you guys kind of can only really update it once a month for free, at least these tokens or whatever. I just want to understand what exactly can you do with your Sketchfab, and if it's possible for it to be more updated, because I use these as art references for an art Discord I do.
Oh wow.
Yeah, for like commissions and stuff. You guys actually saw a few of our pieces in the community highlights. So having access to these assets on the Sketchfab would be really helpful for art references.
Yeah, I hear you. I would probably reach out to Adam. He's the one who manages that, and I might be wrong, but I believe because of the traffic that we got, they wanted to make us like a corporate account, which costs a lot of money.
Ooh.
And so we were like, okay. But Adam would have more details on that. So I do think there are some limitations, and unfortunately, it's like because it's kind of popular. They were like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't like a personal account. So, and then like the amount that they wanted to charge is like kind of not feasible, in the long run. So I'm not really sure about the details of that, but maybe there's also an alternative. I know Adam would be really interested in hearing your thoughts on it though, because like he really enjoys seeing people work off the models and stuff, and he likes making that accessible. So yeah, I'd reach out to Adam.
So I could just DM Adam and he'll get back to me when he can, basically.
If you can DM him, then I'd give it a shot, and if he has time, he'll respond to you.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much all my questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate the questions. Have a good one. All right, coming up next is CSO's Nayid. Welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps, Nayid 21. How are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. What do you got for us?
All right, so I have a suggestion for making the region of Lockmore just a little bit better. So on the east side of Lockmore, there is a relic base called Moon's Copse, and from a lot of the wars that the battles I fought in Lockmore, this relic base is severely underused. And looking at it just sort of as like a strategic perspective, like there's no logi roads that go to it. It's kind of just out of the way, and then there's this large forest that makes it difficult to build in one of the directions.
You can go to foxholestats.com and see Lockmore. Yeah, it's on the east side there. It's like in between West March and Royal Fort and east of Fairmore. Looks like it'd be useful, but you're saying it's not very.
No, and what my suggestion would be to change it into a town and then give it a storage depot, and then maybe move some of the roads around a little bit. But then it would be a situation where, so like let's say the Wardens are invading and they're having difficulty going into Fairmore. Well, they could just switch over to this other town and then push that way. And now the Colonials will have to make the decision of should we move equipment and men over across, and then the Wardens can set up an ambush or something like that.
So I don't have any thoughts specifically about that. But what I will say is Lockmore is specifically designed to be a very sort of empty region. You'll notice that when we move things to hexes, there was a couple locations that only had a handful of towns, like maybe 2 in some cases, like Lockmore. That's really intentional, and so we don't want everything to have sort of this like uniformity of like towns or like approachability, or and in this case, I think like that may not be useful in some scenarios, like that relic base, but that's okay. We don't need everything doesn't need to be useful all the time. I think it's like a misunderstanding that I think a lot of players have is is that like we didn't design this to be like everywhere is going to be a point of interest at all times. But if we do an east-west war, that relic base might become far more useful. So that's sort of this like cyclical thinking that we have to do when we're designing this stuff. We can't just look at it from like one perspective. And while I think that your suggestion could be really interesting, it would also like completely, utterly alter the dynamic of the map, because you never know how that could be used in a different scenario, and that could really change things. Plus, it also kind of evens things out because on average, like three towns is a lot for. And we'd have to balance it out on the mirror side, which is Marvin Hollow. And so we probably, that'd be a really hard change to make in terms of changing it and then it not affecting the feeling of the game. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I hear where you're coming from, but that I just wanted to give a little bit of insight about how we sort of design some of these spaces. And I would say going forward, any maps we add, I think there's going to be a lot less towns in them in general, because I think too many towns leads to too many sort of like
performance issues.
no, more like turtling, which is something we don't want to have happen. So we want people to move stuff. I think like the logi game and the movement game is really, really important. And having a map like Lockmore, where you have these sort of opposing dueling towns on either side of a lake. And Mercy's Wish is obviously a very contentious point. And it's something that gets talked about a lot because there's like this sort of epicenter around the bridge. And this town is often a point of conflict. And Lockmore having a lot of space that you have to traverse in order to like attack is really, really intentional. That was actually something KFC really wanted to do, and it's something that I think is really cool. And I really like the way this map plays out. But it is empty, but kind of empty on purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think the rest of the relic bases are fine the way they are. They're empty in the big open fields and such. I was just thinking back of all the wards I've done, and like trying to think of like all the different scenarios that I've seen. Like if the colonies get pushed out, then the the southern forts get a lot of attention, or like if when the wardens come in, the two northern forts get a lot of attention. And I like the openness of it because it gives just a lot of space for forts or even tank battles. It's probably my favorite place to have tank battles is in Luckmore. But it's just an issue of whenever I look at this region, it's always that fort. I just never see anything at it, and so I'm just thinking, what could be done here? And like I've run around this place for a couple hours trying to think, what could be here that make it more interesting. And like I was just thinking, if maybe there was some sort of more strategic purpose to the area, or like I don't know, I don't think the woods are too interesting, but there is a cool ruins area. And I started thinking, hey, what if this was like the ruins of some I don't know, Warden Admiral or something, and like he had like a large mansion here that got destroyed, and then maybe yeah, like maybe the town hall was his old estate or something.
Oh.
And then I thought, oh, well, what if this was more of like a wealthy district, and the towns were more like spread out a little bit, so it wasn't really as packed in as Fairmore, but like it still had
looking thing.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of decision making that like does go into when we design a town. Every town has a story. Every place in the game has a story. In fact, if a map designer comes in and they just like throw shit down, I get mad at them and make them redo stuff. That's like the right line of thinking. I just think I think putting a town there would really change the dynamic of the map. I think like everything else you said would be like really cool if we were going to put a map there. In my opinion, there's already a town there. I think pay attention to this map if we ever do like a pure east-west war, because I think it'll play out a little differently, because the Wardens or the Colonials aren't going to come in from the same angle as they would on a sort of a standard map layout, and so that makes things really interesting. Though I don't if I'm being honest, I don't think with the current setup we have, like east-west totally works. I think there's a little bit of changes that probably need to be made to really make east-west work, but that's why that is there, basically, is because it's not really it doesn't really matter if it's used. And I think that's like a big thing that I want to point out is like a lot of people have messaged me about stuff and they're like, this is like pointless. It's like, well, maybe like 70% of the time, but that other 30% it could be useful is all that matters. So sometimes something isn't useful, but in other times it can be. And also the detrimental effect in terms of like our goal of what we're trying to accomplish by putting a town there um, could be catastrophic depending on the way that you look at it. And it's all a matter of perspective. Also, I really like that idea of a town. In fact, I think there's something kind of like that in Great March, but I won't spoil for what that is.
Oh.
But that is 100%. I really like the way you thought about that, because when I go in or I get a map designer to come in and make a town or something, that's 100% like the thing that I drill down on people. And you can ask Leon. Leon is I've had Leon like completely redo areas of towns because I'm like, this doesn't tell a story. Like it's just like random. And that's a really important element, I think, even though a lot of the assets are the same, and that's it's something that when you're an indie developer, we can't make everything unique, especially at the scale of this game. Like there's no way it's happening. We have to do our best with what we have. Even if you put the effort into telling a story, it comes across. So even if it's like not 100%, it always comes across. So I really like that the way that you approach that, though. I think that's really cool. And if you're ever doing your own stuff, always think that way, because it will take you a long way.
Yeah, and then if I could just, you made a comment that I want to just go over real quick. You said that you don't want to do more towns in the future, and I find that particularly interesting because when I look
Matt,
at,
did you mean you don't want to do more towns or bigger towns?
No, not like I think any new maps that are added will probably have less towns on average than the ones that we have.
Okay.
Is what I mentioned.
Yeah, because when I think about the towns in the game, it's sort of like how the Wardens have a bunch of mountains, and those create their own sort of choke points or areas of interest to push through. And then the Colonials have an issue where it's pretty much just the bulwark as their sort of like choke point creator. But like I like how Fairmore, for example, that creates its own sort of choke point because you have to push through it in order to continue through the region. And part of the reason why I wanted to pick a town to replace the relic base is it sort of creates a one-way mountain for one of the factions, and it creates that choke point.
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. In the case of Lockmore, it's supposed to be open, for the most part. There is like parts obviously that you have to go through, but I can't stress enough. I would try to calculate the impact. Like if you're ever looking at stuff like this, I try to the other thing I'll say is it's not to say we won't ever do that or couldn't do something like that. It would just need to be a decision that we'd have to make based on a goal. But the thing with Lockmore is if you were to put a town there, you also have to consider every conceivable angle of like what that's going to affect.
Yeah.
And that's like in the one scenario that you presented, it will definitely do that. But in other scenarios, it might create a turtle point, or it might create a point of stalemate between like Fairmore and Moonscopse if there's a town there. It might create it might make it a lot harder to breach the region.
Yeah, I can see that.
So there's it's just that's the tough part, is you always have to consider all these angles, and that's why we do when we released the hex maps, we actually let it settle a little while before we made some changes, and then we made some changes, and then we let that settle, and then we made some changes because we have to kind of see things play out. We can't predict everything, but sometimes something has a real impact on the game that is not great. One of the big things is we addressed Deadlands recently, a couple probably half a year ago, and one of the reasons we made changes to Deadlands is because just doing map layouts, it was impossible to really do like a fair layout. And we did that over and over and over again. And now we made some changes so we could make it a much more fair, sort of evenly split layout. So there's a lot of stuff like that we do, but that had unintended consequences as well. So with a game this big where the map is kind of so important, it's tough because like now that you've said all that with the town, I'm like, yeah, it would be cool to put a town there, but that's also like my first reaction. Whereas like I have to sit down and think like analytically about what that impact would actually be. But yeah, I really like the way you're thinking about it.
I think we have to end the call there. But Naya, that was a really good question. Even if it's not anywhere near where you want, I think
no, it's fine. I just wanted to have a discussion about it. That's perfect.
Yeah, and actually, your idea actually reminded me of something I've been meaning to ask, which is just Can we have like unique town halls? Like you'll never see a town hall that looks like like this or whatever, or like a strategic point, so that we can get that manor like looking place. Like this used to be an admiral's mansion, but now the whole estate is now a battleground. Like that'd be really cool. I like that.
I think unique is probably like out of our realm of our production capabilities.
Unique looking.
Unique.
Doesn't it functions the same as a town hall or relic base,
Yeah,
but it just looks different.
assets are expensive, and that's always
Okay.
something to keep in mind. Is like to make a lot of. That's why it's like in StarCraft, even like everything is like the same, even no matter where you are.
True.
Like even if you're on like different planets and stuff, like your command center is a command center. It's like in a lot of cases, like you have to sort of like. That's what I was talking about earlier. Like we don't have we're like 12 people on Foxhole. I think less than that actually now, and like um, that's important to remember because like in a game like say this is one that I always really like to compare is Dishonored 2. In Dishonored 2, the level design team is 3 times the size of our entire team. The level design team, that's not the asset team that makes the environments, that's not anything like that's just level design. So like to put that in perspective, like we have to do a lot with very little, and we're trying to make a really big ambitious game, and we have to make stuff work for us a really long way. Now, with that being said, I think a town hall revamp is in order. I think the town hall is really outdated. It's like one of the oldest things in the game. So, unique, probably not. Unique is expensive and has very little impact, but maybe different. Who knows? But I do think a revamp is in order for them. I think that, especially before 1.0.
We shall see. Hey, Naya, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
All right, coming up next is Destragon with a couple of text questions here. Not part of our regiment, but he's got some questions in. I'll do my best, as always, to represent the text questions as best as I can. No guarantees, but here we go. So, first one, are water-heavy maps with territories that are not connected with bridges something you've decided to move away from, or will we see something like that resurface eventually? So, completely isolated island sectors.
This question I get a lot, and I want to say before I answer this, I want to say that Max and I really didn't even want to push in this direction. It's something that was kind of more of a necessity than like a desire. And this is where game development is.
I'm sorry, pushing the direction
in the direction of where it currently is, where there's a lot of bridges connecting all the like different archipelagos and stuff.
Oh, so you don't want every fight to be a bridge fight, is what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely not.
Continue.
I think it's important. I really like to talk about the realities of game development because a lot of people don't. And I think this is one of those things where it's like, by having things isolated like that, we were actually limiting the capabilities of our game in terms of like our player count. We went from being able to hold probably about 1,500 players to 3,000 in a single war just by making that change. And so the downside is, like we don't have like isolated islands and like kind of cool like naval stuff in terms of like island hopping and stuff like that in the same way that we used to. But also the way that we used to kind of limited the ability for players to get in the game. And people didn't really use it for like waterlogy or anything. It was kind of more just like random players kind of using those islands in their own ways or to set up their own operations or something.
Which is cool, but
it's great. I love it.
But yeah, it's unfortunately you're outweighed by the fact that, hey, there's like 1,000 people in queue, so we need to like open things up. I get it.
So that was something that we had a lot of conversations about, and it was ultimately the pitch that I made was we thought about like we did talk about like changing them to like land masses, but I was really against that because I still think the theming and the interest is there, and you can still do waterlogy, and I think I really wanted to keep that. The other thing is if we do sort of solve that problem in a different way, maybe through like a more expansive naval update later, we don't need to necessarily do that much work to make it happen because it's kind of all there.
Like a lot of things I've noticed, it's that you don't want to do a lot of work and then like for like 6 months and then 3 years later do a lot of work for 6 months reverting everything when you could have just not done it.
Yeah, and so that was a really tricky one, especially since I really love maps like Fisherman's Row and Oarbreaker. Like Oarbreaker holds a special place in my heart. The original version of Oarbreaker is like my dream map. It's all island hopping and everything. And that constantly had to get changed.
Now it's all I don't even recognize it anymore, to be honest.
But I also think like another thing that I really want, and I know Max really wants to, if I'm wrong, sorry, is like water tiles, just tiles where it's just water and you
like
can
region.
go out there. Yeah, just whole region.
Yes,
just water,
please.
and you just go out there. And I think whatever we do in the future, I know that has like other implications because we have to run servers for an empty water map, but I think with naval stuff being updated in the future possibilities, and I would love to see what happens with that. But right now, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil, and I'd rather have 3,000 people in the game playing a bridge fight than in queue. So
priorities. I get it.
It sucks, but that's one of the reasons why another reason why we did like the bridge update where we added different kinds of bridges, because at least it's different in some areas and there's like kind of different engagements that you can do, and we also made them kind of more fun to engage with. So that was a big deal. We spent a lot of work on trying to make the new bridges like have more engagement value in them and more approaches on them, so it isn't just like you're walking in a straight line. So yeah, it's that's a tough reality of game development.
I will say that I don't think there's enough discussion on this, in my opinion, but anything that involves islands, creating more islands, isolated islands, or whole water tiles, water regions, which I would love. I want to see that, absolutely. I think not enough people are talking about how to rework the naval game. There's a lot of talk about the naval game, but specifically ship versus ship combat and how to transform that into something that's cool. Because right now, ship-to-ship combat is either like straight up water drive-bys with APCs and barges, or really annoying, extremely inefficient bombardments with gunboats, which is people trying to work out coordinates while two gunboats are moving in completely separate directions, and then it just devolves into more water drive-bys with the front gun on gunboats, and it's like we need to see, in my opinion, you see a whole revamp of the gunboat or another water vehicle. That ship-to-ship combat, that needs to happen first, because then you can work out, water routes, how to turn that into a strategic thing, water tiles, all that stuff. And in my opinion, I think that's where it needs to start.
Yeah, I think like I think that's why we kind of decided to like make that like kind of a post 1.0 thing, because we want to give it the time that it's due, but we gotta also kind of put our focus on like the ground game more.
I get it.
It's more important in the long run as the foundation, and we will have the water. Sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
And then I was going to just say that we will have the water stuff. We will have the ability to do water lodge, the ability to at least have water skirmishes and beach landings and all that stuff, because that's also like a really integral part of sort of the fantasy. And then there's like the elephant in the room of like planes. Like that's something that like has to be solved at some point in the future. In my opinion, like because those are the three sort of like land, sea, and air. That's like the whole change in granted we're not realistically World War I and II, but that was the change in combat. It was mechanized warfare across the board. So like if we don't have those three things at some point in Foxhole, it will not feel complete to me. But so in terms of that full engagement, we can get like 90% there. But I think those have to be solved at some point. And I think, we have it there a little bit, but you're not getting like carpet bombed or anything. So, you get in a plane when you're in the home region, right? But get in a plane in quotes. So I think to me that's the kind of stuff that like I would like to see once we've got the game in, that summer update state. I think those are the next things that I'm sure they're going to want to look at.
Well, you've got two very, very meaty post-launch updates, which is naval and air. I think those very big updates right there.
At least I hope so. I don't know because we're not even close to that, but that's I know that the guys want to work on naval for sure. So.
Mark here our prayer. I just want to really ask this question really quick. The concept of hiding pieces of lore in certain locations and on unique items is very neat. But in around 400 hours of playtime, I came across maybe 1 or 2 lore pieces. Will it be more common to run into lore pieces by 1.0?
I've written. Let me just think about the actual number. I've written about a novella's worth of lore that's in the game. So
I believe it. Actually, I think what's his name? African King or something? African Dave in the Steam lore compilation. It's like, geez, Louise.
yeah, and that's like a long time ago too. I don't think that's been updated for a long time. So there's a lot out there. It's a big world. It's really hard to fill. To be honest with you. And there's a lot of stuff that's like I really like. There's actually some kind of inside baseball. There's some mechanics that I have access to that I can script that I just haven't been able to do. I haven't had the time. That will be a little bit cool for the future for lore, but yeah, I really like. One of my favorite things is the items that get picked up and they get like spread around. And I don't want to talk specifics because I don't know if everything's been found, but I think the one thing that I can say for sure that has been found is the tobacco case. So that thing is like has like a legendary status, and it's because like there's one of them. So I love that idea. I love that when someone picks it up and then it like that soldier dies and then they check their backpack. They're like, oh, what's this? And then it kind of like gets moved across the world. I think that shit's really like fascinating to me. So I would love to do more of that. That's something that I would look out for in the future. And I'm always adding more stuff when I can. The focus has been on a lot of other stuff over the last little while, as you can imagine. And one of the things I'll say is if you're into that stuff, pay attention to the things that are on the periphery, because I put a lot of effort into everything, into the names of things, into the descriptions, into you know, the names of locations in the world. All that stuff has a purpose and has a part. So it's not just stuff that you pick up, even though that stuff's obviously the coolest and the most interactable. There's always like it's all encompassing. So if that's something that you're interested in, keep your eyes out for that. But also, I'm going to add more of it for sure. That's Mark. Every once in a while, Mark will also just be like, "Hey, you have like a few days. Add a bunch of stuff." I'll be like, "Okay, great." Because often it's me
a very
like
smooth pipeline.
well, it just depends. It's like sometimes the art pipeline or my pipeline doesn't really match up with where other parts of the project are, and it's like, great, I have like 4 days, cool, I can do a bunch of stuff here, and that's often how it works. So otherwise, it's like, okay, I have a few hours after I finish some project, I'm going to add some stuff, or I'll at least plan the next little wave of stuff. Yeah, it's a really organic process, especially because if we were not doing it in early access where the game has like a live sort of service that's being run, this would all be planned way in advance, and it would be done in advance, and it probably wouldn't be done in the same order as we do things now.
Yeah, if it was like Halo, for instance, right?
Yeah,
like set levels and stuff.
We could do. I could do all of the lore stuff ahead of time, and then we could plan an implementation closer to launch or closer to like alpha or beta or whatever. But because we had to do it this way, it's sort of like it's organic, and it kind of like builds off of previous sets because we have to put stuff out into the world, and so it kind of has to be. I've done some passes on it, but it has to be like ready to go in a way that like it wouldn't normally be if it wasn't an early access live game. And so I also use that to my advantage because I can do it in sort of like acts. I can like reveal information as I want people to know it, which is kind of like really interesting from my perspective anyway, because it lets me see what the things that people are learning and the way that they're gleaning information. So it's fun.
We have to move on. Sorry, I'm going along with some of these questions, but some of these calls, but we're getting a lot of great insights tonight. So thank you everyone for your calls so far and questions that are upcoming, such as from Welch King of the 35CI. Welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps as I wait for him to unmute his mic again. Very awkward how I set this up. I know I just pulled people at random. Hey, Welch King, welcome back. Thank you so much for calling in. What do you got for us?
Thanks, me. So I've got 3 pretty quick questions. So the first one is talking to all the guys and talking to everybody in game with the latest update, we've had the No Man's Land grayscale added, and it's become a large nuisance. Is there any scope to turn that down? As it becomes pretty much so dark at some points, so like it's almost unplayable in some areas.
Yeah, we fixed it. It'll be in the next update.
Oh, cool.
It was completely a bug. It was not meant to do that.
Yeah, I drove into I've actually got a screenshot. I drove into an area where I can only see the headlights from the truck. I can't see anything else on the screen. Like literally nothing else. It's like a black screen. I thought my computer was broken, and then I could see some moving headlights, and I thought, oh no, actually, it's just. And then I came out the other side.
Yeah, it kind of broke. Like, it was one of those things where like we tested it, but when it got into a live environment, it just behaved a little differently, and that also happens sometimes, which is awesome. I don't know why that happens sometimes, but it does. Which is why we rely on dev branches and stuff like that. But it slipped, and so I do apologize because it was something that I was like trying to be very careful with because I knew that could happen, and that happened. So it should be fixed in the next update. We're gonna do a whole new round of testing in Dev Branch to make sure it works and stuff. So
amazing. Well, you can't test all scenarios, so good for you. The second one. So I've heard a lot of griping from both sides on sort of tech tree issues. The big question I've got is how come the dev team are starting to recognize the Warden Scout tank as being the opposite to the Colonial Ballista? They seem to be coming on the same level in the tech tree in multiple wars, and it seems to just be a crazy comparison. Like, is the tech tree being chosen manually by you guys, pre-war, or is it randomized? Because it just seems to be a bit. Things have got a bit crazy lately, and it just seems a bit.
Unfortunately, I'm super not the guy to ask about it. I see the tech trees usually when you guys do. So I think it's just to speak kind of like my guess is they're trying out some things or seeing how players interact with different configurations, or there's a balance reason that isn't necessarily 1-to-1, which often I think like a lot of times the perception of balance isn't what balance actually is when you actually get down to it. So that is to say, I don't know that they're doing that. I could be completely wrong. They could just be doing it for I don't know any number of reasons. But what I did a lot of the balance work on our previous game, Fortified, and usually when someone would say this feels imbalanced or broken or this doesn't feel quite like the way that I expected it to, it's usually not what they think is wrong. It's usually something else that isn't quite right. And so when seeing something like that, it might not quite be that they're being compared directly. It might be something else in the tech tree, and this is being put in to sort of alleviate that. I'm not really sure. But usually it's not so simple as like a 1-to-1 comparison. And that's probably the advice that I'd go with when trying to evaluate that is like maybe look at something else to see how that could impact the progression of the check tree, because that's probably the answer. But I don't really talk to these guys about this stuff, so I don't.
Yeah, it's just a bit crazy because we've sort of looked at it in that fact of there being various stuff on the tech tree, and obviously certain things need to be filled out. We've just it's kind of hard to not look at it in the way I first mentioned, when things are starting to get paired up continuously. And it just seems things are wildly late in the war, and it just seems like this weapon's almost useless at this point.
I will say there's definitely a reason they don't do that stuff random. It's not random. It's not randomly generated. They're definitely doing it for a reason. But yeah, I would my best advice for if you're like I don't think this works, is to probably just leave feedback in game feedback, and we do look at that contrary to what some people believe. I've looked at it personally myself, so they do look at that stuff and they do take it into account. So that would be my best suggestion in that particular realm. Otherwise, I don't have the information to really help.
Yeah, that's cool. Last question I got. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one. So certain weapons costs. I know it's been bandied about a lot of the time. with various different weapons costing the game. Certain things costing R mats, certain things costing B mats. Are you involved in that scope of changing those sort of numbers, or is that somebody else in the team?
I literally couldn't tell you how that's done.
Cool. I will.
Yeah.
I will leave. Fair enough. I will leave that question where it is then. But yeah, that's about it for me. I know one of my guys had a question about a naval update, but you touched on that in the last lot of questions, sort of post 1.0. So we look forward to that. Just one throw for there. If you do want to fix in the short term, a 40mm with a maximum range of 15 to 20 meters, I think that would probably solve on gunboats. I think that would temporarily probably solve the issues we've been having.
Hey, you're talking about ship-to-ship combat?
Yeah, little short-ranged 40mm during like can't really hit short. You know, it becomes very vulnerable if it's sort of 20 to 15 meters. But at the same time, Jane, it makes a gunboat worthy of taking on other ships.
I'm sure Mark will be listening to this, so
it's just it's an idea that we sort of thrown around. But yeah, cool.
In my opinion, I think ships for ship-to-ship combat, spicy take. I think ships need a direct fire anti-ship weapon, but so it can look far, like binoculars far, but you are completely blind, like black screen. So like you only get like 30, 45 degrees of actual sight, and there's a shot delay, and the turret moves slowly, so you still need a spotter.
I think that would kind of ruin naval warfare. The way me and the guys were sort of looking at it was, even if you want to go for long range, just change ship armor. Ships have their own individual armor, and whatever weapon system you put on can't affect that weapon system particularly. Let's say it's the 55mm, and the 55mm becomes a new 40mm for ships. It can only affect ship armor, and then that negates then people running around using. You could have that at long range then. But that would then negate
the numbers game of health and armor. That's actually not really my angle to it. In my opinion, the thing that really makes naval frustrating is just how inaccessible it is in terms of using the cannons, which is like how using it with a howitzer or like any other fire support weapon, which is that the gunner can't see, and it's very difficult for them to get a shot off. And I understand that people can do it. People have really worked hard on mastering it and all that stuff, which is good, but I just think it's way too inaccessible.
I think the biggest gripe that all the guys have had from our end, especially, and like I got to first try a gunboat out like probably 10 wars ago and kind of got a bit on with it, but it was just when an APC pulls up to you or a barge pulls up and mows your gunboat down. That's just the most disappointing thing going.
I hate drive-bys. I hate the water drive-bys. That is the naval game right now. I hate them.
Yeah, I think that should be really risky to try to do.
Because sure.
Yeah. Because in reality, like if you have a bunch of guys standing on like that's like some crazy like Somali pirate stuff. Like that's real. That should be real.
Yeah, repelling borders. Yeah. That is cool, and that should be a tactic. But just the way that it's the norm now, I think is as like this is naval combat. This is top tier naval combat is drive-bys.
I definitely think there's a couple of tools missing there that would really help to like alleviate some of those. Like imagine if you like I think even just having something as simple as like naval mines or something could go a long way to like alleviate some of these problems.
Maybe.
But one of the cool things that I really like about Foxhole, which is like when you add in one new element, it can really change the whole like dynamic. And I think naval is like ripe for that. We have like 3 tools, so I think like there's a lot more. I don't think anybody would argue with you to say that there's a lot that can be put into that.
It's a big expansion, but I just think in the short term, if you change that 14.7 or 14.5 that's on the front end for a 20mm, 40mm, I think that would solve the sort of barges and doing APC attacks for the time being. But that's on you guys.
Well, King, thank you so much as always for staying up late.
Thanks for answering my questions. I'll see you guys in the next one. No, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, coming up next, Chaos. Chaos, welcome back to. Actually, is this your first time on Zero Dark PressCorps?
Yeah. Hello.
All right, hey, welcome to the show. What do you got for us here?
I want to talk about like environment stuff, like map design and level design and everything. thing, because like I'm
Go for it.
somewhat like a development and modding fan, honestly. Like I like this stuff.
That's awesome.
Often it's just like I like the mind of those people, and I want to understand how all this comes together and everything. That's like I want to talk about. Like the thing is, like
Go
what
for it.
I see in the Foxhole retrospective. For example, Deadlands was always there, of some kind, like abandoned ward. And I want to ask, did abandoned ward ever changed or something like that, or was it always the same?
So Abandoned Ward is depends on how long you've been around, but Abandoned Ward has always been there. There was originally the original, very very first publicly available version of the game was Abandoned Ward and the Plaza. That was it. That was the whole game. So it's a bit of a legacy thing, but a lot of the sort of world, both conceptually and thematically, was built around Deadlands. And it kind of holds like a special place in our heart because all the prototyping of everything I ever do is done in Deadlands. So the very first town was in Deadlands. The very first small towns were done in Deadlands. The very first town revamp stuff was done in Deadlands. So Deadlands becomes sort of the prototype. It is the
prayer for Foxhole.
It is the barometer. It is everything is compared against Deadlands. So Deadlands is really important. And then so it also became important in like the story and the world, and it's literally the center of the world. So it has and a lot of us, like, we don't really like, we've had to change it a few times and we really don't like changing it. It kind of feels like quintessentially Foxhole, and it's got some legacy problems, but we kind of like them in a weird way. It kind of has this feeling that is kind of hard to describe, and it's impossible to replicate. So we're hesitant to change everything on Deadlands.
I don't mean like you need to change everything. It's just like I know it's as a mean grinder. It's just like a place that never really changed most of the time. But like what I find funny, you said it's basically the heart of Foxhole. Literally, like everything around abandoned warden. So, but like I find it funny that abandoned wards doesn't got on the refinery.
Well, it's because yeah, like, but the thing is that if you were to allow if you didn't have to move things into and through Deadlands, then that's a whole turtling problem. Then you can create a like major stalemate where it's impossible for Deadlands to flip, or it's impossible to, like, then the war is over. And we've actually had refineries in there. We've had like Deadlands used to be like an entire production town before, and it never works because it just creates too many stalemate problems. And that's where like a level design, like there's an entire industrial district in Deadlands, like, let's be real, but that's where like game design and like reality have to kind of split a little bit, because
Just
we have
being
to
the
allow
center,
it.
Yeah, just being the center of everything, smack dab in the middle, is already a lot.
Yeah, it's really important to control. And so if you can not have to bring anything there to keep it controlled, the game's over.
Self-sufficient, right? If it's self-sufficient, yeah.
If you control the center of the map like that, yeah.
In my opinion, I'm sorry, totally cutting off. In my opinion, I think Deadlands needs to be bigger for it being such a cultural and physical and, a place. I think it needs to be like twice as big if it's the former capital, but that's just me.
But, and I've had this discussion a lot, like even in Canada,
yeah.
like our biggest town is not our capital. So, our biggest city, town. I'm talking Foxhole. Our biggest city is not is not our capital. So, like there's a political capital and there's like a cultural capital. Like Toronto is by far like pretty much Canada's capital, but it's not really. Like, it's not actually the political capital. I think at one time it might have been, but and it's a similar thing in like the U.S. Like Washington D.C. is not New York City. It's pretty small in comparison. So I think like but sometimes, I mean, there's London. Like London is obviously like ridiculous. So like I think it just depends on the angle and what you're looking at. But that's always something that I like to try to communicate because I really like the idea of a separation of like maybe people didn't like living there for some reason, and so it didn't become a cultural capital, but it was like the political seat at some point. But that it's also the center of like could be I think originally we had this plan like that it was like it could have been like a religious important religious site, but not necessarily where people lived. But that was in like an older version of the lore. And so there's a lot of reasons why you would have something like that, but we like the. I think it's so tricky because I think if like the urban area was a lot bigger in Deadlands, it's already a meat grinder. So
Can
yeah.
I ask something? It's just
Yeah.
like if you don't need to answer. Did you study like something like level design or something like that on a some school or something like that? I don't know. It's just like wondering.
I am actually a lot. Funny enough, a lot of the people in at Clapfoot, a lot of the art team are classically trained animators. We all actually, with the exception of a couple of, there's like 2 people who work on this side of things. With the exception of 2 of us, we all went to the same school.
Oh wow.
And so, as
Friends.
classically trained animators, so what I mean by that is we learned how to animate by hand on paper, and
Mhm.
which involves not just drawing characters, but learning storytelling, storyboarding, backgrounds, all that stuff, like
Yeah, yeah,
the whole
animation.
pipeline.
Yeah.
And then I myself along with a couple other people on the team went through 3D game art program, which was mostly
Ooh.
about environment art. So that was mostly about modeling. But I never really had an interest in that ever. I actually, I was the art director for a final project, and I worked more on conceptually the stuff. I didn't actually work as much on the modeling, and I brought a team together, and we built like a whole scene out of stuff. So I've always been more interested in the design side of things rather than just the visual side of things. And I've made like StarCraft maps and mods and all that stuff since I was like 10. So
Ooh.
from my perspective,
Yeah,
it's
that's cool.
more just like I'm more interested in like what players interact with rather than what they look at. And I like to tell stories, and I feel like level design is like underrated in its ability to tell a story.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of
true.
people think it's the art. A lot of the time, the art brings it to life, but the level designer is the one who takes you through.
Can I
So
add something? Like what I think it's like many single player games have right now like you can tell the same story like in a movie or something like that, but like what the game makes special is like to tell the story through the game, through the gameplay, for
Yeah.
example. Like for
mhm.
example Portal is a good example for that.
Mhm.
Tells the story through gameplay. I think that's really important. But like one point when I really ask, it's like, is it if you design a map, what's more important, gameplay or like lore wise or something like that? Because that's what I'm really curious.
So in terms of Foxhole, it's gameplay
Yeah,
is always first. Gameplay is 100% first. But one of
finally.
our one of our one of our core tenets is we want the world to feel kind of like a natural space. We don't necessarily want it to feel gamey, quote in quotes. It's going to because it's a game, but we do our best to try to like make it feel like you're going through like these different sort of uh, natural environments in like a small scale, so you're not going through like desert and swamp and like frozen tundra and then like tropical, like we don't want to like cover all the biomes, but we want it to feel like, oh, this could be like a country. So that's like part of it, but gameplay is always first. We always make gameplay decisions first, and everything else comes after that. That is kind of one of our core tenets, is gameplay first, and then we add on
Yeah.
like theme and all that stuff. So for Foxhole, it's that. For other games, it actually might be the other way around because the story might drive the game, and in that case, it makes sense. But I think in a game like Portal, it would be gameplay like 100% of the time, because then they built the story so that it works with the gameplay, which is really, that game's like brilliant. So they did a really
Also,
good job.
they have the excuse of saying it's test chambers, so it's like, yeah, whatever. This is just a weird test chamber.
It's great. It's a really great narrative hook to tie it all together, and that would have come after for sure. There's some maps maybe they added to like tie it all together, but that definitely would have come like after they'd developed the core hook in a lot of the maps and stuff. But anyway,
I don't know. I mean, like I think for single player games, you're a lot more free, like to base around the story because it's a single player game. But like I think for multiplayer game, it's always important more for gameplay play. But it's like interesting because like multiplayer games are hard to balance. Let's say that. And what I heard from other people, I'm not sure it's correct. Like you try to make the map balance from all direction, or did you try to balance from like one side that the collie side on the south and one's always on the north? Like it's more focused on that.
Yeah, and like I was saying with some of the tech tree stuff earlier, it's not always like 1-to-1. Like I don't want to mirror. I kind of have this I'm really, just so everybody knows, I'll make this perfectly clear. I'm really anti-mirror. I will not design a mirror. I don't like it. It sucks. I think it leads to uninteresting gameplay where it's just the same stuff. I think for games like League of Legends, MOBAs, mirrors are perfect. They're great, but that's not what we're doing, and so I don't think it leads
That's
to like
hard.
interesting scenarios. And Foxhole is all about like interesting scenarios coming to life. And so
Yeah,
when
but
you
that's
have,
hard to do and achieve.
it's really hard, but that's also like the reason I like the job. It's hard. If the job was easy,
Yeah,
I don't think
that's
I'd like
what
it.
I thought. Like you as Clapfoot team, like you really like challenges, like the asymmetrical thing. It's not perfect. Let's say that. I think you know that for yourself, but it's challenging and interesting for sure.
It's almost stupid the level of challenges I've noticed they put before themselves. It's like, gosh, what are you even doing? Hey, Chaos, we do have to get going, but thank you so much for that discussion.
No,
There's a lot of insight.
maybe next time then.
Sorry.
I appreciate your questions. I don't often get to like wax poetic about level design, so
And I know it's just
Thanks.
like I really want to ask more, like what do you think
I
about
know.
like
I'm sorry.
rocks
Actually,
and
hopefully,
like
other people in the next couple of calls will follow up with that. So we'll see. But
yeah,
Chaos,
maybe.
thank you so much for your time.
I'll be back.
All right.
Thank you for your
See you
questions.
next time.
Coming up next is Cyridius. Welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps, Cyridius. What do you got for us?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm just kind of. I suppose I've been listening to the stream and like there's loads of really interesting stuff coming up, and I suppose I might just be a bit less interesting in a certain respect. In that I'm curious about the map UI. Is probably my first question. I don't think work on the UI, but it's probably related, right? In the sense that like when you're planning out your operations, a lot of what's like important that you don't get to see is like elevation on the map. So like I'm just thinking of like the Fleece Road where my regiment was fighting the other day. We took this relic base, and the relic base ended up like being at the bottom of a hill, and I'm like, this is really not strategic to fight out of. But we didn't see that on the map before we went there, and actually, obviously, a bit of experience in learning these things. But I think, is there like any kind of idea of adding like fucking map markers, like height elevation
yeah.
on the maps? Yes, like on the
As a
map.
something you can toggle, yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly would love it. I think we need to come up with a way to like automate it though, because like one of the big challenges, we used to actually like Adam used to put in the maps by hand, but once we hit like 10 maps, it got impossible to keep up with because every time we made a change, he has to like redraw the maps, and it was just like ridiculous. So we moved into this automated workflow, which is great. It works, but it's not perfect, and before 1.0, I actually want to make some changes to it myself so that we can get a little bit more depth out of it in general, especially when it comes to like things like roads and stuff like that. I want you to know on the map like what tier of road and stuff. And there's some people in the community who, if they're listening, they will have actually remembered I tried a couple different things. But they didn't quite work, and I actually have to go back to the automation system and make some tweaks in order for it to really work. In terms of height, I think that's tricky, only because I don't think it's impossible. I don't want to say it's impossible because I don't think anything is impossible. I think it's just a matter of figuring out a way for us to automate it, and especially I think it should be on a different layer, like you were suggesting, that you can like toggle. I think that's actually the trickiest part because we also don't want to add too much noise to the map because it's already really noisy.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't want anything to be too noisy like permanently.
Maybe it wouldn't be default, yeah.
Yeah, so it is tricky. I do think there's a way to do it. I think we just have to leverage some of the height maps that we already have, that the engine generates. But we don't necessarily have direct access to. It's a little harder to like get them out of there. And the trick here is to not have developers manually doing a lot, so that every time we make a change or an update or a bug fix or something, it doesn't have to take someone's like full day just to like update the maps because there's so many.
And then the maps are wrong if you don't, and all that kind of stuff. People complain about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like, something we've toyed with is like, in like World of Warcraft, how like there's like UI mods that can be done.
Yeah.
I think that's something that a lot of the people on the team are interested in exploring. I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't know like if it happens. I don't know when, and I don't know that it will. But I do think that could be an interesting avenue as well, because it's like we're not always going to give people the information that they want.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good idea to me, personally, from the consumer end.
And that would be really cool just to see what people did as well. But then that also opens up a whole bunch of other things like griefing and anyway. So there's a lot of angles to consider. But I do agree with you, 100%. I can't argue with you, and I would love to find a way to do it. I think it's just a matter of, again, when we come down to like challenging things, it's just a matter of figuring it out. And like I said, I like to make myself look stupid so that I can figure out new things. So I'd rather try and fail at it and not get it done. And I can't say that I've tried. So I think like it's definitely something I'd like to look at before 1.0. And if we can't do it, we can't do it. But if we can, it'd be awesome. So
that sounds cool. I suppose just in terms of the last person you had on here, you said you just really hate making mirrors, and I think that's like a good idea. Like obviously it's very hard, work intensive, and all kinds of stuff. But as someone who plays on the colonial side, I'm always, and someone who plays on a very aggressive, like attacking regiment that like we're always trying to take stuff, and then we try to defend what we take, obviously. But it's always about taking the next territory. And when we fight into Warden territory, particularly on the west side of the map, it's just so mountainous all the time, which is like, from the attacker perspective, it's just like hell, but it's from the defender perspective, I'd say it's quite fun. Like this in terms of the design philosophy here, is it just that like when you're designing maps in terms of the elevations and so on, how much do you think about the actual like gameplay ramifications of that, like how easy it is to shoot people from an elevation and all kind of stuff compared to like fighting into it, and like do you also design maps for like the tools that the players have, or for like the tools that you're planning for them to have? So like in the future, you're putting stuff in the map now which like we have trouble with dealing with, but in the future you'll add this tool that like makes it much more sensible for us, or is that something you think about later?
it could be a mix of both in some cases, but in terms of like elevation, there are some cases where I would say like honestly that we probably overdid it. And I would say like Jade Cove is like a really good example of that. But on the plus side, it also led to a lot of really interesting engagements and stories. So I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
And so that's a really tough one because it's like, like you're saying, like it can be tough for an attacker, like attacking a mountainous region, or it could be hard to defend against an open region. But then on the other hand, I hear a lot of people talking about like Warden roads being like really fucked. But then also colonial roads are very not, and so that's an interesting angle, isn't it? So like while there are positives and benefits to different terrain types, there's always like a plus side and a negative side is the way I kind of look at it. And usually when we change stuff like that, it's because there isn't enough of either. And we've seen, in terms of like win-loss ratio, it's pretty even. So I don't think there's anything like blatantly out of whack. I think there are definitely places here and places there that could be nipped and tucked and kind of like adjusted. Or when we eventually get around to adding new maps, that's definitely going to be a consideration. Like in terms of what do wardens have, what do colonials have typically, because we obviously move players around, but we never flip sides, so it's always a consideration, at least from my perspective.
Cyridius, have you played as a warden?
I've played one war as a warden, yeah, but mostly that was a while ago. So like
Sure.
For all intents and purposes, I'm colonial. You know.
Right. Yeah. That's. Hey, let me just say, I
biased, yeah.
love people who stick to one faction. But for every now and then, it might be good, maybe for an off war or low, kind of a low profile war. Maybe good to just switch it up and just see what's up.
Oh yeah, it's undoubted that I am biased to my perspective. Like there is no question to that one. And I think everyone
that's
is
a good question.
But
and I think we do have to move on. But yeah.
Okay, so just I suppose like one final quick thing is that like, do you ever like when you're designing the map? Do you obviously the Wardens and Colonials both have their own side, but have you ever like could you like flip it in any way you want, or like this is it like modular in terms of how you can do it, or is this like that kind of question? Like, could you flip the map and it still work? If is what I'm asking.
We can do anything we want. I kind of this is one of those things where like I want to compare it to World of Warcraft or Warcraft in general. You would never have the Alliance spawn an Ogremar, so they're not. That's not going to happen. It's not just it's one of those things where it's like we also want it to kind of make sense. It's like you wouldn't have Germany spawn in France. You understand what I'm saying? So like it's to me it has to have some continuity, and so there is like I won't say what it is directly because I feel like that's too much information, but I have the developers do have like lines that they do not cross when they make this stuff. As we add more maps in the future, this will evolve, but there is like I don't think it will ever fully flip because it's like at that point, if you really want to see the other side, you could play the other faction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get that makes sense. All right, thanks for answering the questions. That was really interesting.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you so much. All right, coming up next, how much more you got, man?
As long as you want to go.
Oh, okay. All right. Don't tempt us. Coming up next is Alphenull. Alphenull, welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. What do you have for us?
Hey, so I just wanted to talk about urban environments again, even though I know you kind of touched on it before. Because I've asked you personally before, the whole spiel about more cities, bigger cities, region cities, and since now that I know that dream is gone, I just wanted to ask about another thing, which was the individual structures and buildings inside the cities. They just seem a bit small, like not in terms of like verticality, like you guys talked about, but like the interiors of these structures, even when they're fully intact, they seem, I don't know, they just like I've used the analogy of they just seem like a big walk-in closet before. Yeah, like they just seem too small for somebody to live in.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of one of those things. Again, I was talking about it earlier, but it's kind of like that scale shift that we kind of do. Like the tanks are also kind of like a little small in general. There's a consideration made. There's kind of like a scale that we're going for that's sort of like a miniature scale, like literally miniatures, like in terms of how it would work. We actually look at miniatures a lot when we're making decisions. The water is another, for instance, like I kind of based it on that like epoxy resin kind of look in the miniatures. So that's something that we don't want it to be a realistic scale because we're not trying to make Call of Duty. So it is a strategy game. Ultimately, it's a grand strategy game where you play as one person. So we want to bridge the gap between like what is a realistic scale and what is kind of like an RTS. So in an RTS, the scale is really skewed. Like a person is the size of a house in an RTS. So we didn't want to go that far, but we also don't want it to be like fully realistic because it's just not the game we're trying to make in terms of expectations. And a lot of this stuff, a lot of decisions when it comes to art are based on expectations. We don't want you to feel like a hero. We don't want you to feel like it's like a shooter first and foremost. It is a shooter in part. And for some players, like a lot of like myself, like I play it mostly as a shooter. I don't really personally engage much in the logi stuff outside of what I need to know what I'm doing. But as like a fan, I play the shooter game, but it's not a shooter, and it's not necessarily a strategy, like a pure strategy game either. So we kind of have to bridge the gap. And so you would not believe the amount of discussions and decision making that goes into that.
Real quick, sorry to interrupt. I really want you guys to like record one of those sessions and then 2 years later or something release it when everything discussed in there is irrelevant or made public. It's always talked about, but I just love to hear some of that stuff.
You know, it goes through a lot. I mean, you
I
guys
bet.
saw in the 100 stream, you guys saw the town revamp stuff, and like there's buildings that just went off the screen, and they were like big, tall,
Right.
like skyscrapers and stuff. Again, it's one of those things where like it stopped feeling like Foxhole. It stopped feeling right. It felt more like an urban shoot, like top-down shooter, which it's not. So that's like a really hard balance, and it's a like it's kind of it's Mark's sort of like vision for what this is supposed to feel like. And if you go back to games like you know Commandos and
Hmm.
what the hell is the other, the Jagged Alliance and stuff like that, there's kind of a similar vibe to them. They're these like turn-based strategy, or they're real-time strategy, like small scale like squad games. And they don't quite feel right either. um, and you can always see the tops of buildings. That's like another thing. But yeah, we had bigger buildings that had different rooms. Like I had all these like layouts where I did like, because I really liked, if you guys know from the Foxhole Festival last year, I like designing really tight like combat scenario spaces. It's just fun for me. Um, and so I did that for a lot of the houses, and they were kind of cool, but they were more of a chore to like navigate in for what Foxhole is, because Foxhole's not a shooter. You can't like do the same things that you can in a shooter. You can't like corner peeking isn't like the same thing, and that kind of stuff. So ultimately, the houses need to be more of like an icon for what a house is, not actually the size of a house. I don't know if that's a good explanation or not, but that's the kind of thinking that goes into this. And it's like when we did the industrial districts, which is like something that like Anthony and I poured a lot of ourselves into. It took a lot of work because we really wanted these industrial districts to feel like they're these tight, tall spaces, but it still had to work in Foxhole. It's just this like push and pull and push and pull and push and pull until you get it feeling right. And it's a little hard to like quantify, but it's this context, this like expectation setting, so that you don't feel like you're playing a shooter, versus uh, an RTS or something like that. I don't know. I hope that answered the question, but
Yeah, no, I just wanted to talk about, because like the because I mean, in terms of like the combat settings that I find myself in most of the time, it's pretty much always like wide open flat fields, like in Lockmore Great March, or tight canyons that are still, it's still kind of an outdoorsy open area in a way. And in
yeah.
terms of like trench combat's different, but I wanted to see like maybe interior combat could be expanded upon, maybe.
That's why I was talking about like breaching and doors and stuff earlier, because I
Yeah.
think that could add
Yeah.
a layer without really like affecting that feeling that I was describing. Because also I feel like you should be able to kind of use any garrison as a way to like kind of hole up. But right now, like someone could walk in with a gun and just mow you down. It's not really like safe to be in a structure sometimes. So I definitely agree with like that interpretation, but also we don't want to like set the wrong expectation. So it's just a balance. It's I know that's like not a sort of a non-committal answer, but it is a bit of like just a balance of like just kind of pushing and pulling and kind of massaging it into place until it feels quote unquote right. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Completely off the rails question. What do you do in your free time?
I'm a writer, so I do a lot of writing. Like a lot of my spare time goes to writing. I work on a webcomic. That also takes a lot of my time. Um,
Would you like to
I
share it? Would you like to share that comic?
sure, if you are interested in webcomics, it's Sonder. It's called Sonder. You can go to sondercomic.com, SONDER comic.com. Um, it's about it's like a multi-dimensional story. But and then on top of that, obviously I play video games. So, right now, while we're all locked down, that's pretty much all I'm doing is writing. I run a writers group. I do a lot of stuff around writing, so that's kind of like my major focus outside of Foxhole and Clapfoot is, I write a lot of short stories. I'm writing a novel. That's the kind of stuff that I want to do.
Nice.
what are the games that you're into right now? Like the most recent ones, I guess, over the past couple months or so.
We'll close with this, but yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm playing right now is Overwatch. Why? I don't really know, but that's all I'm playing. So
I get it.
I've put like a lot of hours in Overwatch in 2021. Pretty much like as soon as the year clicked over, that's all I've played. So.
All right.
I'll hop back on the TF2 wagon myself for a while. But hey, Alphenull, thank you so much for your questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So I think, Matt, if you said you're good for whenever, I think I got 15-ish more minutes, if that's okay. Or if you want to.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. Awesome. Now, Liquid Popsicle he's part of the 128th, but he's also in the press corps. So I think we're going to skip him as due to regimental rules, technically. We're going to come back to him after a call from Troll Dad 79. Troll Dad, welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps. What do you have for us?
Thanks for having me back. It's probably just more questions about the urbanization. A lot of people have already talked about it, but I kind of want to focus more on the industrial side. Because I think I've talked to this to Mark before about like if there might be another expansion on the industry scene, because currently I love the look of the industrial sectors. They look very gritty, and that's what I like. With a lot of storage depot, like with what seem to be storage facilities and small manufacturing centers. But I would like to see more variations in industry around the world, where there's sawmills, grain elevators, mills, or say steel mills over like in various different areas. I just want to get your thoughts about that, like if there would be this kind of thing happening.
I would love it if everything in the game was unique. If I had my way, if I had all the money in the world. Unfortunately, like I was mentioning earlier, it's not a popular answer, but we have to work with what we have. So, you know, the industrial districts were put in specifically because we felt like the urban areas didn't feel like urban areas without some kind of industry. It just didn't quite make sense. At the very least, it's kind of like trying to hit the biggest bullet points we can, because that's what we can sort of manage with the team size that we have. And we're always adding in like we've been kind of laser focused on going towards 1.0 now, but in the past, I would always ask back when Anthony was on the team. I would always just ask him. I'd be like, "Hey, can you give me if you have time, like between tasks or whatever?" Because sometimes there is some downtime, and that's when you get stuff like the banana car. Do you have if you have like a couple days, can you throw this building together, and I'll shoot it at Julian, and I'll shoot it at him, and we'll work on this like unique thing. So like one of the examples is the greenhouse. That was one that was done like that. There's a bell tower in the Blemish. There's the only one of its kind in the whole game is there. There's some stuff like that that we do when we have time. But because we don't just have like unlimited budget and unlimited time, our artists are very valuable. Their time, they've got a lot of stuff to do. I don't know if you've seen how many things that we put out in terms of like vehicles and stuff like that, but like all that stuff has to be modeled and designed and textured and everything. So we can't just have like, if we had someone like constantly just churning out like environment art, that'd be awesome, but we don't. So we do what we can. I think like I like all those ideas. I honestly I have nothing to disagree with. It's just more like it's more of a we have a certain scope for the game, and I think even if we did have that kind of manpower, we still might not use it all, because it may not be evenly distributed, and that's a whole other topic of like art design. Is like we can probably make things more detailed than we currently do in some situations, but we can't make it that way evenly across the whole game, so it would look out of place. So that's one of those things where like you have to make these calls about where you want to put that effort. And so I would expect that you might see one or two unique sort of industrial structures in the future. But in terms of them like getting kind of like every area has sort of like a unique thing, I just maybe Foxhole 2. I don't know. Like, it's probably not going to happen because of just sheer production realities.
Right, that's reasonable. And then I think, and was there at one point going to be for the neutral vehicles that we have, the harvester, the flatbed, the crane, and the CV. Was there at one point was there like two concepts for like faction specific or like just faction specific looking vehicles?
No, not for those. I think there's a sort of a neutral party, and we wanted to when it comes to like basics like that, like basics. Um, I don't think that was ever in the plan. I think it would be like a nice to have, but as in terms of like the lore and stuff, there's like there's a neutral, there's the Bassett Motor Company and stuff like that. So we that was also something that was done. There was a lot of like neutral parties in the 40s and the World War I era that would sell to different countries, and so we kind of played that up because we don't necessarily want to have like, oh, my crane is better than your crane. Like that seems like not worth it when it comes to asymmetry. But that's not to say maybe there would be like a variation in the future that could be faction specific or something. But I think for the basics that you need to actually like run the game, I think trucks are probably. Well, I'm not going to say I actually don't know because I don't plan this stuff. So, but I would probably say trucks are probably the line. I think when it comes to like harvesters and cranes and construction vehicles and stuff, it'd be a pretty hard sell. I think to have one vehicle have an advantage over another.
And I think that's really all the questions that I have. Really, thank you for having me on. By the way.
No, absolutely. Thank you for stopping by.
Yep.
Appreciate it. All right. Coming up next, we're going to swing back around to Liquid Popsicle, who we skipped for regimental reasons. Text question. What is the process for taking, for instance, a new vehicle from initial concept to a complete product to be shipped in the next update?
Sorry, can you go over that last part again?
Yeah. So what is the process for taking a new vehicle from initial concept to final product?
Yeah. So I mean, usually, at least in the conversations that I've been part of, because I don't usually get too involved in this unless there's like thematic questions, because I have a lot of other things to worry about. So, but like Julian and the game designers, they plan like way ahead. So there's like a schedule that's like way ahead, and of like stuff that they want to do, and then it's like kind of gameplay related, like what holes need filling, what kind of things are fun and exciting. Like you can't really discount like the cool factor or like the fantasy element as well. It's like what is missing in the fantasy, what is
rule of cool.
Yeah, rule of cool, and then also just like what holes need to be filled, what kind of like weird crap do we want to do that's sort of Foxhole unique, and just sort of balancing those things out. And then they come up with a list, and Julian does concepts, and then those concepts are then turned into a model. There's a block-in, usually a really early block-in, that is then tested to see if it's like meeting the gameplay goals. Gameplay then is then adjusted depending on issues that arise or something, and then it'll go to another round of block-ins and testing until that's sort of like settled, and then it goes to like final model, and then that's rigged and animated, and then put into the game in a final form. And that's kind of the process for everything. That's kind of the process for everything, honestly. Like even like map stuff, if there's a new structure, it's the same thing minus the rigging and animating. You always block everything in because you need a sense of it. Otherwise you're just going to run into a lot of issues and you're going to waste a lot of people's time. So yeah, that's pretty much the process every time. And then when it comes to like gameplay decisions, like, if next time Mark or Max is on, ask that same question, they'll have a different like sort of angle on that. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Liquor, for your text question. I think we are going to end the night on this call. Thank you all, as always, for getting in the call queue. I really do appreciate it. But welcome back to Zero Dark PressCorps LaFarfaday. What do you have for us?
I have a couple of questions. Yes, hello,
Go for it.
Mark, or NorthernPixels, or I don't know how you
Not
want
Mark.
to Mark, my God, I'm
two letters different.
Yeah, I'm so. No, I have the same name.
I almost did it a couple times myself.
Yeah, because my name's Matt also. So yeah.
Mark sometimes legit just calls me Map. So
So I have a couple questions. First of all, I have a couple of introduction questions that I'm gonna briefly go over.
Okay.
As a citizen of Montreal and Quebec as a whole, I find your comment about Toronto being the cultural capital of Canada very offensive. You care to explain yourself?
Sorry, could you say that again? I kind of lost you.
Okay, I said that as a citizen of Montreal, I find your comment that Toronto is the cultural capital of Canada very offensive.
Listen, I'm biased. I'm Toronto biased.
What's next? You're gonna tell me you're a Maple Leaf fan too?
I don't like hockey, so.
What?
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a hockey fan.
Geoffrey, we have a problem here.
But I will say, if it makes you feel any better, my favorite place in Canada is Montreal.
Sure,
that's no joke. I absolutely love Montreal.
Yeah, that's why I keep telling Mark that they should move the Clapfoot office to Montreal. The jokes aside, yeah. So I wanted to talk. I had a couple more jokes, but since it's the last call of the night, I'm gonna skip through them. So, what is the decision pipeline for making something into art? So, like,
So, did you say making something into art?
Yes, making something to something that we're gonna see in game. So.
Oh, okay.
So for stuff I work for robots, sometimes I dream of something. That I get to the school the next morning, and I'm like, shit, I gotta make that. So do you have like stuff that you think of, or that you dream of? It's like, okay, we gotta make this, and like I'm gonna find time to make this.
I can definitely say, like, when it comes to the lore stuff, like, yeah, there's definitely stuff where I'll just be like out for a walk or like having a shower, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, and I'll be like, I need to figure out a way to like incorporate that. When it comes to like art is a complicated, expensive thing. So usually, like sometimes, like I said, the banana car came because I was talking to people on FOD, and people were like, make a banana car the next April Fool's joke. So I was like, Adam, I sent him a couple of references, and I said, just model this for me. I'll tell you what it is later.
You edited somebody say, make me a banana car.
Yeah, and he had it done in like an hour, and so it was great. Anyway, so like sometimes we do stuff like that, or it's just like I'll message Adam and I'll be like, I need this because I'm trying to do something, and so he'll just like whip it out really fast, and we'll fix it and we'll get it done. But a lot for the bigger stuff like vehicles and stuff go through a lot of iteration and work and concept art and stuff.
And there must be something like indirectly, like somebody touched a tad bit about community toxicity and like toxicity as a whole earlier. There must be like when you guys are creating something, are you guys worried about comparison that Foxhole could do to, let's say, World War II or World War I? More I think infamously World War II.
So in terms of like vehicles and stuff like that, like in terms of like the actual like warfare element, like no, I mean we have like we have green ash, we have like kind of gas and stuff like that. Like, but that was a reality of World War I. It's not something we want to like totally shy away from. My big like philosophy on that is like I think we need to show like the reality of what war is, because I think it affects people. Like, and I think like a lot of the reaction, a lot of the kind of storytelling that we see players do with their own projects and stuff and related to Foxhole show that's effective. We're not glamorizing war, and I think that's really important. That's like something I hold very, very dearly. Now, when it comes to lore stuff, it is actually really important, in my perspective, that we don't draw parallels to World War II. I don't want to at all. And when it happens, I actually change it because it has happened. And it's usually accidental. It's almost always accidental. And every time it happens, I will change it because I don't think that it's worth it, and I don't want it to.
It's like stepping in a minefield.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, it's like not the story we're trying to tell. It's not the kind of thing, we're not trying to get into that kind of political landscape when it comes to like the situation on the game. And it's like, it's also like disrespectful. That's one of the reasons why we chose to do our own world, because we don't want to have disrespect. We want to kind of like take it in the same way that like a lot of other fantasy is. They'll look at like, Game of Thrones is the War of the Roses with dragons. So
Yeah.
like, it's a real thing that happened, but it's not what the world is. And so from my perspective, I feel very strongly about that. It's like, it's really recent, and I think so. Sometimes some people have a little bit of a hard time like separating just the style of conflict with the reality.
Yeah, because that like I play Arma, and like my Arma clan started playing Foxhole, and they played Colonial, and they were like, I don't want to play Nazis. They were saying that the Wardens are the Nazis. And I was like, what are you on about?
Yeah,
Like,
there's no parallel. Like
yeah, no, I know.
No parallel.
I think it was something uniform. He said at some point the Germans had like blue uniforms, some stuff like that. I was like,
There's
that's
some
neither here or
it
there.
leans more France, but there's a little, at least in the tanks,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of German in there, Franco-Germanic, really
Yeah.
just more Celtic and British. But yeah,
We take like Julian doesn't care like about that stuff at all when he's designing stuff. Like, he designs stuff that he thinks are interesting and that fits the fact. Like, he's very particular about what goes into each faction's like equipment. So, and when it comes to like the world, like I've said this 1,000 times. I actually like that I'm saying this out loud, but I've said it 1,000 times to other people individually. I don't really care about World War II. Like, I don't even look at it. The only thing that World War II and World War I has is the style of conflict, and obviously like the era aesthetics. But in terms of like the geopolitical landscape and all that stuff and all the history, I don't even glance at it. It's not even like a thought in my mind. So
I will have to disagree with you on this. One of my favorite band is Sabaton, and Sabaton makes music about famous battle or heroes and stuff like that. And
I just discovered Sabaton, by the way. They're great.
Really? Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite band actually, and it's something like to talk about World War II, and the way Sabaton approach it is they're not talking about the Nazis or the Axis or the Axis or the Allies. They're talking about the people. So because there's a lot of battles that are fought, like the Nazis were bad. Don't get me wrong, but there's a couple of battle where it was like the Wehrmacht. It was not like the SS. And they fought alongside the Allies because they thought, okay, this shit's crazy, Like the shit they're doing is crazy. Like there was a battle for Castle Leader, or there was even the 9th Army at the Battle of Berlin that basically made a humanitarian corridor to evacuate as much people as they could to the Allies.
Grounded point of view, which Foxhole, I think, I'm very glad that it mirrors that. Where I think the people are the players, so there you go.
Well, so to put something in perspective, what I was referring to was more as a video game. I don't have control over what happens. I only have control over like the canvas. So so by presenting a kind of a unique canvas, and I actually agree with you 100% with Sabaton. That's why I like them, because they focus on individuals, and that's actually my thing. A lot of people are like, "What's your favorite tank?" or like, "What do you think about?" I don't really care about that stuff that much. I care about like what the impact is on humans and how it affects human lives and their lives going forward, and the lives of the generations that follow. That's what's interesting, and that's always what I focus on when it comes to like the storytelling in Foxhole.
I'm gonna go in my last question because we're running out of time. We're running out of time. So it's a more of a like map related question, game design related question. So with the No Man's Land update, we've seen the introduction of craters, seen the introduction of trees that get blown to pieces, garrison houses that get torn down and can be rebuilt. Would there be something like I know Geoffrey, you're gonna meme because I'm gonna talk about the Harvester again, but would there be a way to have a tool in Foxhole which is either the Harvester or the CV or another new vehicle to get rid when a tree is blown up? It's just a single tree in the map, so you could have a vehicle that destroy that, so you can make a bunker in place of it, or fill a crater hole and build something on top of it. Like I know it might be hard to do, but it's something that could be possible.
I think filling a crater is probably more likely. Excuse me. That makes more sense to me. The getting rid of trees, like you could argue, you could go cut down trees with an axe or something. But we also kind of don't want people like terraforming. That's not really like the goal.
Yeah, that's my first thought.
So it was actually like it was something that I drew like a heavy line in the sand. Like some of the team will probably be like really annoyed with me, but I drew kind of a line in the sand where it's like I really want to make sure that people understand that like trees are like an obstacle that you have to deal with. So we don't want you to just like terraform. Now you could fucking blast the shit out of something, but that also costs you a lot. If it didn't cost you anything, I would not be okay with it. But I do think like filling in a crater with some effort. I think it costs something in some way. I kind of dig that idea because it's also like it's kind of like a consequence of a consequence of a consequence, which I actually think is really interesting. It's really like dynamic, as opposed to just like being able to wipe out trees. Like you could wipe out a whole field and then just do whatever you want with it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe
if you
not
take
the right
like an
game.
axe, if you take like an axe and it's like, hey, we're just going to spend the whole day removing, like deleting the
chopping
trees.
down trees.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
and then
that
like
would make sense.
literally, it's just manual labor as opposed to something that cool that happened.
Yeah, but because when we do, like, you talk about the cost of war, you talked about that like earlier, and there's a city that you rebuild, but at the end of the day, when a city is getting shelled to pieces and it remains that way, even if the city is like abandoned ward and it's no longer an active frontline region, there's always a rebuilding effort that goes behind it. So I don't know if there could be like any type of gameplay type for remediation of what war did or some shit like that. But yeah,
I think that'd be really cool. I think right now when it comes to like the garrisons and stuff, I think those are going to stay. I think we really wanted to like. I think that was kind of playing into the cost of war thing. Like, if something is bombarded enough, it is hopeless. It's hopelessly destroyed. And we it's also like you have this beautiful field, and it is now just fucking craters, and it's disgusting. Like that's definitely like a whole part of that whole update was to just like it's kind of like the scars of war. We really wanted to. We have the ability to do it in a way that like you can't really experience in other games in the same way. And we really wanted to like give you that feeling, and I think it's like to be honest, one of my favorite parts of the last update is the artillery, and I did not even know that it was going to work when we started. So it's probably not perfect. It's probably has some rough edges, but like it's really cool to me now in a way that it just wasn't before, and I think that has a huge impact.
And it's also like it's very like when you see creators trying to farm around your bunker base that you're trying to frantically repair, it adds an extra layer of pressure. But talking about extra layer of pressure, what happened with the snowstorm? Because that was a big buff to the Russian player and a big nerf to the German player. But
weather is unpredictable.
Okay, so it's still there.
Oh yeah,
you
guys. There may be wars where there's no weather. There may be wars that is entirely a snowstorm the whole time. There's weather. We do not want weather to be predictable in any way.
So it's not taken out. It's still there. Okay, I was under the impression that it was taken out completely.
No, one thing I will say is like there's a lot of fake news going around. I see it all the time. So
speculation. We have a guy in Warden Navy as we call it the chief speculator. It's like every time there's a dev stream thing, it's like starting to go on wild tangent. I'm kind of doing the same thing, but it's when I talk. But yeah, it's speculation. Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much for your questions.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, see you around. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for your time. This is really good, Zero Dark, like they all are. But I think getting a fresh perspective with what you know and what your responsibilities are on the team, I think people really enjoyed that breath of fresh air. And next week, I'm sure people are ready to get back into the endless tech tree debates. But for now, we got a really good one here. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for donating your time out of the office to do this for us.
Yeah, it's super fun. I love talking about the shit, and I never get a chance to. Also, I had meant to come back a long time ago, but it just never lines up. Usually, the day that you guys run it, I usually have something planned, so I was just really lucky today.
I wish I could be more flexible, but it's it's almost always at this time. But yeah, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, we're gonna wrap it up here, and I just want to say again, thank you to all of our callers, particularly the ones that couldn't get into the to call tonight. It sucks, but we gotta draw. I have to draw the line somewhere. I'd love to go all night, but I can't for reasons. But yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you to all the members of the press corps who do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you don't see. And there's a lot of things in motion right now, very exciting things. Honestly, in my opinion, the press corps has never been better, and we like where we are right now is really exciting, and I can't wait to talk more about it. Like we are on the up and up, and as I say that, I'm sure like a week from now, something's going to happen, and then like we'll be delayed another 6 months or whatever it is, whatever it goes. I love it. I love what I do, and I love that people can enjoy the space here. So regardless, for the press corps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. Good night and good fight.
The Press Corps is a non-profit creative collective of artists, reporters, and players from the MMO video game Foxhole by Clapfoot. Our mission is to engross our audience in and amplify the stories of this unique war ecosystem. The Press Corps was founded in early 2018 by former PlanetSide 2 Radio Free Araxis host, Captain-in-Arms. It is a separate community entity and is in no way representative of Clapfoot. For more info, visit the Press Corps Discord through the link below.